Chapter 2754. Chapter 2754. Chapter 2754. Inexplicable nervousness. The white saint's soul grasp became Nietian's saint's soul blood seal. Not only did it allow him to break through, but it also allowed him to sense the star origin stone again. At this moment, Nietian could already use the star heavenly slash. With the breakthrough in his strength and the recovery of the star origin stone, Nietian's battle prowess had increased by more than 10 times. Si Xiaoya sensed the surging and fierce sword intent around Nietian and was flabbergasted. She could not believe that a person could increase his strength by so much in the blink of an eye. Roar! The Saint's Soul Blood Wolf King looked at Nietian and bared its fangs as it growled, as if it was making a threat. Unfortunately, Nietian was not afraid at all. His eyes were filled with killing intent, and his body was brimming with battle intent. He had just achieved a breakthrough and was in need of someone to test his combat prowess. The Saint's Soul Blood Wolf King was a perfect candidate. Roar! The Blood Wolf King sensed Nietian's killing intent, and its eyes trembled slightly. It seemed to be afraid of Nietian, but it did not retreat. Instead, it let out a low roar and leaped into the air. Like a blood-red arrow, it shot straight towards Nietian. Good timing. When Nietian saw this, there was no fear in his eyes. Instead, there was calmness in his eyes. He shouted loudly, and the starlight heavenly slash in his hand pierced forward. Sword intent instantly condensed, and the space around him became heavy. Boom! In an instant, the sword's shadow whizzed out like a raging dragon, and the aura it exuded was unstoppable. In the next moment, a horrifying and shocking scene unfolded. Kaboom! Bang! The instant the sword shadow and the Blood Wolf King collided, the space around them trembled violently, following which a violent energy exploded out, and the Blood Wolf King's body actually exploded into a bloody light. One sword. With just one sword, Nietian blasted the Blood Wolf King into a puddle of blood. Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya were completely petrified by what they saw. If they hadn't seen it with their own eyes, they wouldn't have believed it. They knew how powerful the Holy Soul Blood Wolf King was. Even someone as strong as Ji Cho Wu could not kill the Blood Wolf King. Nietian, on the other hand, slaughtered the Blood Wolf King in a crushing manner. It seemed like Nietian's battle prowess was even stronger than Ji Cho Wu's. Furthermore, it was not just a little stronger. Nietian's sword descended. Looking at the bloody scene in front of him, he was shocked and could not react for a long time. Before he drew his sword, he knew that he would win, but he didn't expect that he would win so easily. Am I that strong? After a full 10 seconds, Nietian finally reacted, but his eyes were still trembling, and his face was full of confusion. Even if his strength broke through and his astral origin stones recovered, he shouldn't have become so strong. It's not that you're too strong. It's that the Holy Soul Blood Wolf King has become weak. However, the next moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded, directly pouring a bucket of cold water on Nietian's head, and said, "The Wolf King was originally injured, and it lost the Holy Soul Blood Seal, so its strength naturally became weak. The Wolf King, just now, was similar to an ordinary Holy Soul Blood Wolf, at most a little stronger." When Nietian heard what Fat Cat said, his face darkened. It turned out that he was not too strong, but the Wolf King was too weak. Fat Cat's words were actually half true and half false. The Blood Wolf King had indeed become weak, but it was still far stronger than an ordinary Holy Soul Blood Wolf. He just didn't want Nietian to be too proud, so he said it casually. After obtaining the Holy Soul Blood Seal, Nietian's strength had indeed become a lot stronger. This was undeniable. Now, even if he walked out of the Holy Soul Valley, he would be able to fight against a slightly weaker half-sage powerhouse. After a moment, Nietian became cold. He took a deep breath, took a step forward, and held the Wolf King's blood core that was floating in the air in his hand. At this time, Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya finally reacted, but the way they looked at Nietian was a little different, and they were still surprised. "Feng Qi, Xiaoya, are you two all right?" Nietian walked over and asked with a faint smile. Yeah, Nye Tian, what happened just now? How did you become so strong? Feng Qi took a deep breath and asked with a trembling voice. I'm not too sure. It seems that after the white holy soul grass entered my body, it was absorbed by my martial body, so I accidentally broke through. Nye Tian said with a faint smile. He didn't say anything about the holy soul blood seal, not because he wanted to lie, but because he didn't want Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya to worry. After all, he still didn't know what the holy soul blood seal was. This. Feng Qi's face was stiff, and he looked at Nye Tian speechlessly. That expression seemed to be saying, why didn't I accidentally break through? Nye Tian didn't say much, and after confirming that Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya were fine, he immediately looked at Ji Cho Wu and said with a frown, How is Ji Cho Wu? Ji Cho Wu was still unconscious. The wound on his neck had not completely healed, but his breathing was very stable, so his life should not be in danger. He should be fine. He will wake up soon. Feng Qi frowned and said indifferently. Then, the three of them landed on the ground, but they didn't leave immediately, but dealt with the hundreds of holy soul blood wolf corpses on the ground and took out the blood core. After a while, Ji Cho Wu finally woke up. Don't come near me. Her eyes suddenly opened, and the instant she saw Nye Tian and the others, she actually screamed in panic, and her body subconsciously retreated, curling into a ball. Nye Tian and the other two were stunned, and looked at Ji Cho Wu with shock and embarrassment. It was very hard to believe that Ji Cho Wu, the number one of the outer court, would actually be so panicked like now. It's fine, you are already safe. Nye Tian's eyes flickered, and he said with a faint smile. At this time, Ji Cho Wu calmed down a lot. The panic in her eyes dispersed and was replaced by indifference. You guys didn't take off my mask, right? Immediately, she touched the mask on her face and asked with an ice-cold gaze. No. Feng Qi shook his head and said with a laugh. Could it be that you are so ugly that you can't show your face? Ji Cho Wu's gaze darkened, and he swept a cold glance at Feng Qi and said nothing. Feng Qi had an awkward expression, and he muttered, just joking. Nye Tian looked at Ji Cho Wu and secretly said in his heart, this girl seems to have a dark experience. Under her mask, there should be a secret. Ji Cho Wu was inexplicably nervous, as if he was a person who lacked an extreme sense of security and was constantly on guard against others. Where is the Holy Soul Blood Wolf King? Ji Cho Wu completely calmed down and suddenly asked with a frown. Don't worry, the Blood Wolf King is already dead. Si Xiaoya said with a faint smile. Dead? Ji Cho Wu's eyes darkened, and he was clearly very surprised, and he asked, How did it die? I killed it. Nye Tian said with a faint smile. You? Ji Cho Wu was taken aback, looking at Nye Tian with astonishment and doubt in her eyes. However, in the next moment, she felt that the latter's aura had become much stronger and said in astonishment, You've broken through? I just broke through by luck. Nye Tian smiled indifferently. What about the white holy soul grass? Ji Cho Wu's eyes darkened, and then he thought of something and asked in a low voice. I fused with it. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and he said with some uncertainty. Actually, he also did not know what the white holy soul grass becoming his holy soul blood seal meant. Chapter 2755. I found a treasure. A voice suddenly sounded in Nye Tian's divine sense, causing him to be stunned on the spot. This voice was the voice of the white Saint Soul Grass. After the white Saint Soul Grass became his Saint Soul blood seal, it could still speak. Are you all right? Ji Cho Wu saw that Nye Tian was suddenly stunned. His eyes darkened as he asked. I'm fine, Nye Tian replied, forcing himself to calm down. Ji Cho Wu nodded, then said, I need to rest for a while. Nye Tian nodded. They were not in a hurry anyways, and he had too many questions in his heart that he really wanted to clarify. Next, Ji Cho Wu rested on the spot, while Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya watched from the side. Nye Tian began to look inside his body, thoroughly inspecting it. His strength had broken through to the peak of half-step. His aura was much stronger than before, but other than that, there were no changes. The power of fiend gods was still awakened 16 strands. The starry sky 9 limits of the 9th layer of the star stone was still only the first 3 limits. The 9 war god art was still at the first layer. But yet Tion could clearly feel that his martial body was much stronger than before. Next, he focused his attention on the Saint's soul blood seal on his forehead. Under normal circumstances, the Saint's soul blood seal was invisible. Only when it exploded, it would flash with a white halo. Sensing the Saint's soul blood seal with his divine sense, Tion immediately discovered a strange scene. The blood seal was like a whirlpool. It was actually constantly absorbing energy from the outside world. Could it be that the energy released by the Saint's soul blood seal was absorbed from the outside world? Tion was stunned for a moment, guessing in his heart. When the Saint's soul blood seal first appeared on his forehead, it released a wave of energy, helping him break through to the peak of half-step realm. And now, the Saint's soul blood seal was constantly absorbing energy from the outside world, storing it. Tion felt that the Saint's soul blood seal was like a power pool that stored energy, and now, the power pool of the Saint's soul blood seal was almost empty, accumulating bit by bit. Fat. What exactly is this Saint Spirit blood seal? Tion couldn't help but ask Fat Cat. You don't have to ask me this question. Just ask the blood seal of the Holy Soul directly. The Fat Cat chuckled. It was extremely happy. He understood that with the Sacred Spirit blood seal, Tion's cultivation speed would increase by several folds. Tion was still far from experiencing the benefits of the Sacred Soul blood seal. Ask about the Saint's soul blood seal? Tion was stunned for a moment. Then, he used his divine sense to communicate with the Saint's soul blood seal, but he didn't know what to say. After thinking for a while, he asked, "Little thing, are you a Saint Soul grass?" "Bastard." The voice of the white Holy Soul grass came out from the Holy Soul blood seal. It was extremely angry as it shouted, "This emperor is not called a little thing. This emperor is the Emperor of Holy Soul grass." Emperor of Holy Soul grass? Tion was stunned again, speechless. So this white Holy Soul grass was actually the Emperor of Holy Soul grass. Then do you have a name? After calming down, Tion continued to ask. Of course I have a name. The Emperor of Holy Soul grass was extremely angry. It said, "This emperor is called Lulu." What? Tion's gaze froze. He suspected that he had heard wrong. 6. The Emperor of Holy Soul grass was even angrier. It repeated word by word. Tion's face was filled with black lines. He couldn't react for a long time. How could he have imagined that the Emperor of Holy Soul grass was actually called Lulu? This name, why does it sound like a pet? Little brat, do you think my name isn't domineering enough? Tion didn't speak for a long time. This made Lulu even angrier. He shouted and shouted. After all, he had already become Tion's blood seal of the Holy Soul. The latter couldn't do anything to him, so he became arrogant. Cough, cough. Tion coughed dryly. He smiled and said, "Domineering, very domineering. That's more like it." Liolio's voice was much calmer. He was even a little proud. Tion was speechless. He felt that this Emperor of Holy Soul grass's intelligence was similar to that of a 6 or 7-year-old child. It was very easy to coax. "Master Lulu, I don't quite understand. What is the blood seal of the Holy Soul grass?" Then, Tion smiled faintly and asked carefully, "The blood seal of the Holy Soul is this emperor. This emperor is the blood seal of the Holy Soul." Lulu replied snappily. He didn't seem happy. Tion was speechless. What kind of answer was that? "Master Lulu, what use do you have?" After thinking about it, Tion changed the way he asked. "This emperor's use is very big." Liolio's voice became a lot louder. He said, "Any martial artist, as long as they can get this emperor can make their strength increase rapidly." Why? Tion's eyes were slightly hot as he asked. Hee. At this moment, Lulu smiled proudly and said, "This emperor can continuously absorb external energy and store it in the blood seal. As long as the energy in the blood seal is full, it can be directly absorbed by the martial artist." As expected, When Nyetian heard Liolio's words, his eyes trembled, and he exclaimed in his heart. The blood seal of the Holy Soul was similar to what he expected. The Holy Soul grass could absorb all kinds of energy. So it wasn't strange for the blood seal of the Holy Soul grass to be able to absorb external energy. He just didn't know how fast the blood seal of the Holy Soul could absorb external energy. Master Lulu, other than absorbing external energy, what other uses do you have? Nyetian took a deep breath and continued to ask. This emperor has many uses. I can also help you refine your martial body, help you integrate other energy, or expel other energy. Lulu smiled proudly and said, This emperor is too weak now. I'm only at the first rank. When this emperor grows up, you will know how powerful this emperor is. When Nyetian heard Liolio's words, he was completely stunned. He didn't expect the blood seal of the Holy Soul to be so powerful. Although Lulu said it casually, Nyetian could hear that any use of the blood seal of the Holy Soul was heaven-defying. Take the current Nyetian, for example. If he integrated the origin energy with the help of the blood seal of the Holy Soul, it would be twice the result with half the effort. If he was injured by some strange energy, the blood seal of the Holy Soul could force the strange energy out of his body. And listening to Liolio's words, the blood seal of the Holy Soul was far more than that. To be able to obtain the blood seal of the Holy Soul, Nyetian really picked up a treasure this time. No wonder Fat Cat didn't let Nyetian kill Lulu, but let Lulu become the blood seal of the Holy Soul. However, there was another important reason why Fat Cat let Lulu become Nyetian's blood seal of the Holy Soul. Fat Cat wanted to use Lulu to fight against the blood seal of the Holy Soul. The blood seal of the Holy Soul in Nyetian's body could flare up at any time. And as long as Lulu could become stronger, fighting against the blood seal of the Holy Soul in the future would not be a problem. He could even directly swallow the blood seal of the Holy Soul and transform it into Nyetian's own power. This emperor is tired. I'll tell you this much first. At this time, Liolio's voice was heard, and then there was no more movement. Nyetian curled his lips and couldn't help but smile. This emperor of the Holy Soul grass named Lulu was definitely Nyetian's biggest gain in the Holy Soul Valley. Nyetian took 3 deep breaths in a row to calm himself down. He was looking forward to seeing Liolio's growth in the future. Next, Nyetian wanted to ask Fat Cat more about the blood seal of the Holy Soul. However, right at that moment, Xixiaya suddenly called out. She seemed a little nervous. Nyetian, what's wrong? Nyetian's eyes focused and looked at Xixiaya. Chapter 2756. Killing Enemies. Nyetian frowned and followed Xixiaya's gaze. Moments later, several figures appeared in his field of vision. It's this guy. Nyetian couldn't help but furrow his brows when he saw the figure in the lead. He smiled faintly. The person he saw was no stranger. It was Chun Shuaibin, one of the 10 tigers of the Outer Sect. Not long ago, Nyetian fought with Chun Shuaibin, and both of them were injured. Chun Shuaibin was injured by Nyetian's bone, eroding his soul, shackling chains, and had to leave. But now, he appeared again. Chun Shuaibin's figure arrived and stared at Nyetian. He sneered, "Stinking brat. We really are enemies on a narrow road." Nyetian smiled. "Looks like you're quite lucky. The soul, shackling chi in your body has been forced out." Chun Shuaibin sneered again. His eyes were cold. "Kid, I admit that you're strong. But this time, you won't be able to escape from me." "Did I say that I'm going to escape?" Niet Tianling sneered and replied calmly. Chun Shuaibin's eyes darkened. He finally realized that something was wrong. He was stunned for a moment before he sneered, "Kid, so you've broken through. No wonder you're so arrogant." Only now did he realize that Nyetian had broken through to the peak of the half-step paramount deity realm. He was shocked, but he didn't think much of Nyetian. In his eyes, peak paramount deity and half-step paramount deity were no different. They were both trash. He was injured by Nyetian because he was careless. And in the last battle, Nyetian had the help of 2 divine beasts. This time, he didn't have them. "Young Master Ban, look." But at this time, someone behind Chen Shuibin stepped forward and pointed at Ji Cho Wu. Chen Shuibin's eyes narrowed. When he saw Ji Cho Wu, his expression changed, and he couldn't hide his shock. Of course, he knew Ji Cho Wu, and he knew how terrifying the latter was. He was ranked third in the Outer Sect 10 Tigers, while Ji Cho Wu was the head of the Outer Sect 10 Tigers. Although it was only a difference of 2 ranks, the battle prowess of the two was comparable to clouds and mud. It was not the slightest exaggeration to say that Chen Shuibin were also not Ji Cho Wu's match. Chen Shuibin never thought that Ji Cho would actually be together with Nie Tian and the rest. Chen Shuibin, you better leave immediately. At this time, Ji Cho Wu stood up and stared at Chen Shuibin with cold eyes. Ji Cho Wu froze for a moment, then sensed that Ji Cho Wu's aura was a little weak. He couldn't help but sneer. Ji Cho Wu, you're injured? Even if I'm injured, you're still not my opponent. Ji Cho Wu's eyes darkened as he said coldly, Really? The corner of Chen Shuibin's mouth twitched, his gaze cold and disdainful as he said, Ji Cho Wu, let this young master give you a word of advice. It's best if you don't interfere in this matter. What if I insist on interfering? Ji Cho Wu's gaze darkened. Then he took a step forward as the aura around his body suddenly skyrocketed. But at this moment, her body trembled. Then she took a few steps back, almost unable to stand. The wound left behind by the Emperor of St. Soulgrass was too severe. Ji Cho Wu forcefully released his aura, causing the unhealed wound to become even more severe. Seeing this scene, Chen Shuibin directly sneered and said arrogantly, Ji Cho Wu, you can't even stand properly. How are you going to fight this young master? Let me give you a word of advice. Don't humiliate yourself here. Chen Shuibin, you. Ji Cho Wu's eyes trembled. He was extremely furious. Miss Ji, rest well, just stay at the side. At this time, Nie Tian spoke, faintly smiling as he looked at Chen Shuibin and said, This kind of scum, there's no need for you to take action. Leave it to me. Being called scum by Nie Tian, Chen Shuibin's expression couldn't help but darken as he angrily roared, Stinking brat, who are you calling scum? You. Nie Tian took a step forward and coldly replied, You're courting death. Chen Shuibin's expression darkened again. Even his breathing became hurried as he roared. There's one person who's courting death. Unfortunately, it's not me, but you. Nie Tianling laughed, then took a step forward, and his figure soared into the sky, leaping into the sky. Looking down at Chen Shuibin, he shouted loudly, Chen Shuibin, you want to kill me? I'll give you a chance. Come and fight me. You're courting death. Chen Shuibin's expression was so dark that it looked like blood was dripping from it. With a roar, his figure rose from the ground, arriving in the sky and standing opposite Nie Tian. The two figures stood tall in the sky, one as sharp as a sword, the other as forceful as a saber. Ji Cho Wu looked at Nie Tian, his gaze slightly trembling as he said in his heart, Nie Tian, will you be Chen Shuibin's opponent? Feng Qi and Si Xiao looked at Nie Tian. There wasn't much worry in their eyes. They had seen Nie Tian make a move and felt that before Nie Tian broke through, Nie Tian was able to fight with Chen Shuibin until both sides suffered heavy injuries. Now, he would definitely crush Chen Shuibin. The other martial artists all had a disdainful and mocking attitude. This kid is definitely tired of living. He actually dares to fight with young Master Bin. He's completely courting death. Yeah, young Master Bin is one of the top 3 experts in the outer court. This kid only has the strength of half-step peak. It's completely like the difference between a flood dragon and a loach. Just wait and see. This kid will definitely be killed by young Master Bin with one slash. These people were brought by Chen Shuibin, obviously standing on Chen Shuibin's side. They completely didn't put Nie Tian in their eyes, directly treating the latter as an idiot. Which normal martial artist would challenge a half-step peak powerhouse when they were only at half-step peak? Kid, this time, I'm going to kill you with one slash. High up in the sky, Chen Shuibin smiled coldly. The murderous intent in his eyes was incomparably thick, and he said in a deep voice, Without those 2 divine beasts, How are you going to block my slash? Make your move. Facing Chan Shui-bin's surging murderous intent, Tian just stood with his hands behind his back. His face was calm, as if he didn't put the other party in his eyes at all. You're courting death. Chen Shui-bin was infuriated by Tian's arrogance. With a roar, his figure moved directly, and a sky-covering water screen appeared behind him. The against-the-current saber in his hand struck out, and the saber intent around him was like raging waves. Against the current, swallowing wave, cleaving sky. In the next moment, he roared fiercely. Due to extreme anger, even his facial features became distorted, hideous, and horrifying, like a demon god. Boom! The surging saber intent condensed in the void, and a terrifying saber shadow appeared. Like a surging waterfall with monstrous power, it rolled towards Tian. So powerful. The crowd below was astonished when they sensed the terrifying saber intent from afar. The people that Chan Shui-bin had brought with him wore cold smiles, thinking that Tian would definitely be drowned by the saber shadow. However, Tian was currently standing in the sky, surrounded by a towering sword intent, like a strange mountain piercing through the clouds. Is it this move again? Unfortunately, it can't hurt me. At that instant, Tian's lips twitched as he mumbled. The sword intent that he had accumulated was activated, and the force of the celestial demon burst out at the same time, activating the sharpness of the sword intent to the maximum. 9 limits of the starry sky. The first limit, human slaughter. In the next instant, Tian said calmly, and the starry sky slash in his hand moved. This time, he had executed the 9 limits of the starry sky. Chapter 2757. Boom! High up in the sky, the saber shadow was like a wild beast with a vast aura. It swooped down, and the terrifying saber aura permeated the space as if it could drown and kill everything. Chen Shui-bin's eyes were as cold as ice, ruthless and insidious. He seemed to have seen the moment when Tian was blasted into a bloody screen. He used the against the water enchantment for this saber strike. Coupled with the strongest against the water extreme killer move, he had full confidence that he could directly kill Tian. At this moment, the sword aura around Tian had already begun to surge. His entire aura was like a huge volcano that suddenly began to erupt. 9 limits of the starry sky, a martial technique from the 9th level of the galaxy, coupled with the astral sword intent around Tian. The power that could erupt was even more terrifying than the sacred heaven-defying sword. His sword aura is so strong. Below, Jichou looked at Tian. His pair of cold eyes could not help but tremble. He even felt that the sword intent in his body was trembling a little, as if it was trembling. She was a swordsman, and her perception of sword intent was extremely sharp. She felt that although the power that Tian revealed at this moment was not strong, the kind of aura that was about to erupt was very terrifying. It was like a landslide and a tsunami that could destroy everything in the next moment. If she were to say it, the current Tian was like an iceberg. The power that was exposed to the outside was only 1/10. The most terrifying power was in his body, and it would only erupt in the next moment. Strong. At the same time, Si Xiaoya's eyes also trembled. She also felt Tian's terrifying strength. Although she was not a swordsman, she possessed the scar of the heavenly Tao, and her perception was far beyond that of an ordinary person. Boom! At this moment, Tian's figure moved slightly. The sword aura around him suddenly exploded like a sun, exploding in all directions, and heaven and earth trembled. Buzz! In the next moment, an intense sword cry rang out, piercing the clouds and splitting the stones, rushing straight to the 9 heavens. This sword cry was deafening, as if it was announcing that Tian was the ruler of this world. How is this possible? The sword cry resounded in Chan Shui-bin's ears, causing his pupils to suddenly shrink, and he exclaimed in his heart. At this moment, he finally felt a strong sense of threat. Unfortunately, it was too late. Boom! Tian stabbed out with the astral heavenly slash, and a gigantic sword image that was thousands of meters long appeared. It roared against the heavens, and a dragon defied the 9 heavens. Right at this moment, Ji Cho Wu and Si Xiaoya's eyes trembled at the same time, feeling Nie Tian's terror even more vividly. Boom! Bang! In the next moment, the saber shadow and the sword shadow collided. There was a loud bang in the void, and the saber shadow was directly shattered, turning into endless saber intent and dissipating. No! Chen Shuibian's eyes trembled. He instantly felt the aura of death and screamed miserably. However, before his voice could spread out, it was suppressed and dissipated by the terrifying sword intent. In the next instant, before he could react, Chen Shuibian's figure was drowned by the sword shadow, and there were no bones left. The horrifying scene made everyone's faces stiffen, their eyes horrified to the extreme. Especially the few martial artists that Chen Shuibian brought over, they were directly scared silly. Their faces turned a ghastly green, and each and every one of them turned into stone people. The raging waves of sword intent in the sky dissipated very quickly. Nie Tian's figure stood tall, like a giant between heaven and earth, a proud and aloof emperor. At this moment, he was also quite shocked in his heart. The might of the starry sky 9 limits exceeded his expectations, instantly killing Chen Shuibian. One had to know that Chen Shuibian was ranked top 3 in the outer court. Nie Tian smiled faintly. His figure moved, and he directly landed. His eyes looked coldly at the few martial artists that Chen Shuibian brought over, and he did not speak. No, don't kill us. At this time, those few martial artists finally reacted. One of them's teeth were chattering, and he could still maintain some rationality. He said, We didn't see anything. St. Sol Academy did not allow students to kill each other. Nie Tian killing Chen Shuibian was actually violating the Academy's rules. These few people were naturally afraid that Nie Tian would kill them to silence them. Scram. Nie Tian frowned and said coldly, Yes, we'll scram. Those few martial artists nodded their heads like a rattle drum and directly ran away in terror, disappearing without a trace in an instant. Nie Tian, you shouldn't have let them go. Those few martial artists completely disappeared. Ji Cho Wu took a step forward and said with a frown, They are after all disciples of the Academy. I don't have any enmity with them, so I'll let them live. Nie Tian smiled faintly, his face calm. Chen Shuibian is one of the outer sect's 10 tigers. If the news of you killing him were to spread, it will be very troublesome. Ji Cho Wu's eyes darkened slightly, and he said indifferently, It doesn't matter, I don't care. Nie Tian smiled faintly and was very calm. He had even killed Tian Zhuoan, so what did a mere Chen Shuibian matter? Even if these few people were spread the news of Chen Shuibian's death, the Academy would not be able to do anything to him. QL11 Ji Cho Wu glanced at Nie Tian, and his eyes flickered, but he said nothing else. It was only then that she realized how frightening Nie Tian was, and she even felt that if they were in the Holy Soul Valley, she might not be a match for Nie Tian, even if she was at her peak state. Ji Cho Wu was already a rank 9 demi-saint, and was only a step away from becoming a demi-saint. But at this moment, she felt that she was not even a half-step pinnacle martial artist. Nie Tian took a deep breath, and his expression returned to normal. He knew that the reason he could kill Chen Shuibian so easily, aside from his own ability, was more importantly because he was in the Holy Soul Valley. Due to the presence of powerful barriers in space, it was equivalent to reducing the gap in ability between Nie Tian and Chen Shuibian. Nie Tian's current ability was probably that of an early-stage lesser deity, while Chen Shuibian was probably a pinnacle lesser deity, and the gap was not that great. If it was under normal circumstances, Nie Tian would not even be a match for Chen Shuibian, much less directly kill the latter. Next, Nie Tian was not in a hurry, and continued to let Ji Cho Wu recover his ability. Half a day later, Ji Cho Wu was finally more or less recovered, and only then did he stand up. Why haven't the Saint's Soul Blood Wolf and the Saint's Soul Grass appeared after so long? At that moment, Ji Cho Wu came to Nie Tian's side, frowning, and asked a little doubtfully, Nietian had the Saint's Soul curse in his body, which was a great temptation for the Saint's Soul blood wolf and the Saint's Soul grass. But for half a day, it was very quiet all around, which was a little strange. It is a little strange. Nietian's eyes narrowed, and he frowned. What's strange about this? Right then, the Emperor of the Saint's Soul grass, Lilio's voice sounded out, saying somewhat smugly, "This Emperor became your Saint's Soul blood seal. Those little wolves and little grasses, forget about taking the initiative to find you. They can't wait to hide from you." When Nietian heard Lilio's words, he could not help being stunned, his expression turning stiff all at once. Turns out that with the Saint's Soul blood seal on his body, those Saint's Soul blood wolves and Saint's Soul grass all did not dare to approach him. This way, Nietian could not help being somewhat disappointed. He was still counting on the Saint's Soul blood wolf and Saint's Soul grass to earn points. Chapter 2758. Nietian was taken aback when he heard Lilio's words. His eyes lit up as he asked, "What kind of good place is it?" Lulu had been staying in the Sacred Soul Valley for a long time. The place he mentioned must be something that ordinary people could not think of. A good place is a good place. Why are you asking so many questions? Lulu chuckled and said, "You'll know when we get there." Nietian's face darkened. He felt like he was talking to a mentally unsound person. Forget it. Why bother with a blade of grass? He comforted himself and asked, "Are we going now?" "Yes," Lulu agreed. A map appeared in Nietian's divine sense. "This is the map of the Sacred Soul Valley?" Nietian was stunned for a moment and asked in astonishment. He did not expect Lulu to give him a map of the Sacred Soul Valley. "Do you see that light, Dot? That's where we're going." Lulu smiled proudly and said, "As long as we get there and obtain that thing, this sovereign can help you break through to the peak deity realm within a few days." "Really?" Nietian's eyes lit up when he heard the words peak deity realm. "Of course." Lulu let out a weird cry and said, "This sovereign has already become your Sacred Soul blood seal. Why would I lie to you?" The corner of Nietian's mouth twitched. He forced himself to calm down and said, "Let's go now." What he needed the most right now was to improve his strength. Although he had just broken through to the half-step peak deity realm, his current strength was far from enough. Lilio's words were too tempting for him. If his strength reached the peak deity realm, Nietian's battle strength would skyrocket once again. Most importantly, once his strength reached the peak deity realm, Nietian was confident that he could fight a high-level half-saint. Yet now, he could fight low-rank half-saints at most under normal circumstances. "Nietian, what are you thinking about?" Jicho Wu could not help but ask when he saw Nietian's strange expression. "The Saint Soul blood wolf and the Saint Soul grass will not appear, but we can go to another place now," Nietian said with a faint smile. "What place?" Jicho Wu froze for a moment and asked. "I don't know yet. We'll know when we get there." Nietian nodded slightly, then looked at Si Xiaoye and said, "I need to go somewhere first, then I'll go with you to find what you want, okay?" Si Xiaoye's eyes flickered for a moment before she finally nodded. They had been in the Sacred Soul Valley for almost 2 days, and the Sacred Soul Valley would only be open for 3 days, leaving them with not much time. Hopefully, Nietian's next destination wouldn't take up too much time. Nietian didn't stay any longer and immediately headed towards the light that on the map of Holy Soul Valley. That place wasn't too far from where they were now. Approximately 2 hours later, Nietian and the others arrived at a wilderness. Tens of thousands of meters in front of them was a thorny forest. From afar, it looked like a dark abyss. Nietian came to a stop and pointed into the distance. "That's where we're going," he said, pointing into the distance. "That's the 10,000 Bones Cave of Blood." At this moment, Si Xiaoye's beautiful eyes trembled as she looked at the thorny forest in front of her and said in shock, 10,000 Bones Cave of Blood." Nietian was stunned for a moment, then looked at Si Xiaoye and asked with a frown, "How do you know?" Even he didn't know what was in front of him. So how did Si Xiaoye know? What was even more strange was that it was a thorny forest in front of them. How was it a blood cave? Si Xiaoye didn't answer Nietian, but took out a map scroll and opened it. "This is the map of Holy Soul Valley." Tian looked at the map in front of him and couldn't help but exclaim. He never thought that Si Xiaoya would take out a map of Holy Soul Valley. The map in front of them was relatively rough, and many places weren't marked, but it was generally the same as the map in Tian's divine sense. It was indeed a map of Holy Soul Valley. Si Xiaoya's beautiful eyes trembled as she looked at Tian in surprise and asked in horror, "You know this map?" Tian was stunned for a moment, then said, "I guessed it." He couldn't say that Lulu had already presented the map of Holy Soul Valley in his divine sense. Si Xiaoya frowned slightly and didn't ask any more questions. Instead, she pointed to the map and said, "Look, we are now outside the 10,000 Bones Cave of Blood." Everyone looked at the map and nodded. According to the map, the thorny forest in front of them was the 10,000 Bones Cave of Blood. Si Xiaoya, how did you get this map? Tian frowned and asked cautiously. This was drawn by someone who entered Holy Soul Valley before. Si Xiaoya nodded and said, "Actually, the thing I'm looking for is in the 10,000 Bones Cave of Blood." "I see." Tian's eyes narrowed as he thought to himself. The thing that Si Xiaoya is looking for can't be the thing that Lulu mentioned, right? If it was really as he guessed, then it would be terrible. After all, he had promised Si Xiaoya that he would help her find the thing. If he found it, he should give it to Si Xiaoya. "Tian, let's go in now." Si Xiaoya looked at Tian and said in a deep voice, her beautiful eyes burning with passion. "Okay." Tian didn't think too much and nodded as he prepared to enter the 10,000 Bones Cave of Blood. After a while, everyone came to the outside of the thorny forest. They didn't dare to enter directly, so they stopped outside. "This aura, it's so strange." Tian looked at the thorny forest and felt a strange aura circulating in the surrounding space. He couldn't help but frown and said in a deep voice, it was as if the entire thorny forest was shrouded by a huge force, which was very strange. "Everyone be careful. There seems to be a barrier in front of us." Si Xiaoya's expression changed slightly as she suddenly reminded everyone. Everyone's expression changed and immediately became cautious. Si Xiaoya had the marks of heaven, so her perception was terrifying. There were many things that Fat Cat couldn't see, but she could see. At this time, Liolio's voice sounded in Tian's divine sense. "It's okay, just go in directly." "Really?" Tian couldn't help but be surprised and expressed his doubt. "Of course." Lulu laughed and said, "What that little girl sensed was just an illusion barrier. It's not a threat to you." Tian's eyes narrowed, and he was about to ask Fat Cat for her opinion. "Tian, listen to Lulu. He won't harm you." In the next moment, Fat Cat's voice sounded directly, and she laughed and said, "Unless he wants to die." Lulu had become Tian's Holy Soul Blood Seal, which was equivalent to being tied to Tian. If something happened to Tian, he would also die. "Okay." Tian nodded heavily, took a deep breath, and said to the others, "I'll go in now. You just need to follow me." But Si Xiaoya's small face stiffened, and she wanted to say something, but she was interrupted by Tian. "Trust me." Tian smiled faintly, and then, without hesitation, he directly stepped forward. In the next moment, a strange scene happened. Chapter 2759. Chapter 2759. Chapter 2759. A strange space. Tian took a step forward, as if entering a space-time vortex. His entire person disappeared into thin air. This scene caused Si Xiaoya and the others to be taken aback. "Let's enter as well." Jichuwu calmed down and said in a low voice, then took a step forward, preparing to enter. Fengqi and Si Xiaoya exchanged glances and also prepared to enter. At the same time, in a strange space-time, it was pitch black all around. There was nothing, only a pitch-black space, silent and dead. Tian stood in this void, his expression shocked and horrified. Just now, he only felt that he passed through a thin layer of barrier. Then he came to this strange space before him. What shocked him was that this space was not normal. The space seemed to be filled with a strange force, actually suppressing his perception, causing his vision to be pitch black. If it was in a normal space, even if it was pitch black, it would not affect his perception. But at this moment, the space where Nyetian was in, he could not see anything. He felt that he had become an ordinary person, only having the most basic perception ability. In the next moment, Nyetian suddenly felt movement in the space around him, causing his gaze to freeze. Nyetian. Then, Ji Qiuwu's voice rang out, with a trace of unconcealable panic. It was very obvious that her perception ability was also suppressed by the strange force in the space. What's going on? Where are we? Then, Feng Qi's voice rang out, even more nervous than Ji Qiuwu. The space here is strange. Xiaoya's voice rang out, very flustered. She discovered that even if she had the marks of heaven, she could not see anything. Everyone calm down, don't be nervous. Hearing the voice of Ji Qiuwu and the others, Nyetian hurriedly spoke, stabilizing everyone's emotions. He also did not know where this place was, but there was no use in being nervous now. He had to maintain his composure. Then, Nyetian prepared to communicate with Fat Cat, but shockingly discovered that his consciousness seemed to be imprisoned. He could not communicate. He frowned. He could not help but feel a little flustered. Then, he tried to communicate with Lulu, but once again, he found that he could not communicate with him. This space was too strange. It actually isolated Nyetian's communication with Fat Cat and Lulu. Calm down, I must calm down. Taking a deep breath, Nyetian forced himself to calm down. The surrounding space was completely dark, and one couldn't even see their own fingers in front of them. It was indeed stifling. Nyetian calmed down a little and began to walk slowly. He wanted to figure out what kind of space he had come to. Buzz! At this moment, a white light appeared in the air. What is it? The eyes of Nyetian and the others trembled as they exclaimed in unison. The surrounding space was too dark, and the appearance of that white light was abnormally dazzling. Nyetian and the others stared at the white light. That streak of white light was extremely strange. It was like a fish swimming in the water, swift and active. In the next moment, Feng Qi seemed to have discovered something and exclaimed, "Look over there!" The eyes of Nyetian and the others quivered as they saw another streak of white light appear on the other side. Then, more white lights appeared and circulated in the space, instantly lighting up the surroundings. Nyetian looked in the direction of the white light. After a while, he realized that they were in a huge cave. The cave was huge, with a radius of a few thousand meters. Moreover, the surrounding walls were smooth, as if it was completely sealed. Nyetian could not help but wonder how they got in here. What he was sure of now was that the thorny forest he saw before was just an illusion. At this moment, the space they were in was the real thing. Then, Nyetian thought of what Xiaoya had said and frowned as he murmured, "Could this really be the cave of 10,000 bones?" Feng Qi and the others were also very surprised. They looked at the smooth stone walls around them, speechless. The four of them slowly gathered together with nervous expressions. "What the hell is this place?" Feng Qi frowned and blurted out, "Boom!" Just as he finished speaking, a beam of white light suddenly exploded, turning into thousands of rays of light that spread through the void. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the other white lights also exploded. Instantly, the light in the cave increased and became extremely blinding. Nyetian frowned. He had a feeling that something was about to happen. He opened his eyes and looked around cautiously. However, as the light rays became denser and more blinding, his eyes could no longer take it, and he had to close them. After a while, Nyetian felt the light in the space weaken. He then tried to open his eyes. At that moment, the scene that unfolded before him made his expression change drastically. He was extremely shocked. In the space, countless white bones floated. They were all skulls and were densely packed together like giant waves. "What the hell is that?" Feng Qi's scream was heard in a panic. Xiaoya was also very afraid. Her face was pale, and she could not help but hug Feng Qi's arm. Ji Qiuwu was still relatively calm. However, his eyes were also trembling slightly. Nyetian took a deep breath and forced himself to calm down. He began to carefully observe the white skulls in the air. These skulls were very strange. They did not look like human bones. They looked like they were carved out of jade. The surface was white, but faintly glowed with a golden light. Could these be the bones of saints? Nietian frowned. He was quite shocked in his heart. He sensed that the aura of these skulls was strange. There was a layer of faint light circulating on the surface. It seemed very mysterious. Are these skulls really human bones? Jicho-Wu opened his mouth and asked solemnly. These white skulls indeed did not look like human bones. Boom! At that moment, the white skulls in the air suddenly moved. Instantly, the void trembled. In the next moment, a shocking pressure appeared. It surged and enveloped Nietian and the others. Be careful! The sudden scene made Nietian cry out in shock. He immediately wanted to revolve the Yuan meridians in his body to resist, but he discovered that he could not release any power from his 9 Yuan meridians. The strange power in the void not only suppressed his sensory abilities, but also suppressed his Yuan meridians. He could not even sense the star origin stone in the 10th Yuan meridian. Why? Immediately after, countless white bones rolled over like a landslide, their imposing manner engulfing everyone. Oh no! Nietian's expression suddenly darkened as he cried out in his heart. It was as if they had entered into a hopeless situation. Those who trespass into the cave of 10,000 bones die. At the next moment, a majestic voice suddenly rang out in the void and reverberated through the space. Chapter 2760. Saint Spirit, the sudden appearance of the white silhouette caused Nietian's face to darken. The aura of the white silhouette was extremely terrifying. Standing there, it was like a mountain of vast ocean, unreachable and unfathomable. Kill! In the next moment, the white silhouette let out a low roar and released its aura. Instantly, the endless amount of white bones became violent like a raging tsunami, crashing towards Nietian and the rest. Damn it! Nietian's pupils shrank as he sensed the aura rushing towards him, and he roared in a low voice. The raging wave of white bones was too terrifying. Once it came crashing down, Nietian and the rest would die on the spot. But now, everyone's strength was suppressed, and they could not unleash any of their strength. Boom! In the next moment, the raging wave of white bones broke through the air and was about to crash down. Do it! In this moment of life and death, within Nietian's divine sense, Liolio's voice suddenly rang out. Nietian's pupils constricted, and he instantly reacted. He suddenly felt the star origin stone, and his body shook. The star energy gushed out like a raging ocean, shaking the void. Rumble! In an instant, the star energy surged out and forcefully pushed the raging wave of white bones away. How is this possible? The white silhouette was dumbfounded by the scene before him and screamed in horror. Old man Gu-A-Gu, you didn't expect this, right? This kid has the star origin stone in his body. Almost at the same time, Liolio's voice rang out, resonating in the void. Lulu, the white silhouette who was known as Old Man Gu-A-Gu, screamed in horror as his body trembled. Nietian frowned, and the star energy around him dissipated the endless amount of white bones. He then retreated and released the astral shield to protect Si Xiaoya and the rest. Then, his eyes darkened as he looked at the white silhouette. At this moment, he finally saw the silhouette's appearance. This was an elder, not a physical body, but rather an illusory figure of light. It should be a damaged soul. It was as if there was a story between Lulu and the old man. Old man Gu-A-Gu, your 10,000 bone seal can suppress other powers, but you can't suppress the power of the stars. At this moment, Liolio's voice was heard again. It was arrogant and provocative. It's actually the power of the stars. The shadowy old man let out a low roar, and the aura around him became violet. He had never imagined that Nietian actually had star essence stones. Old man Gu-A-Gu, it's time for you to die. Lulu laughed maniacally and said, Nietian, kill this old man for me. Nietian frowned, a strange expression on his face. At this moment, he knew that Lulu had not brought him to the blood cave of 10,000 bones to help him increase his strength, but to kill the elder in front of him. This emperor of Holy Soul Grass spoke like a 6 or 7-year-old child, but he did not expect him to be so scheming. Obviously, Lulu deliberately did not communicate with Nyetian. With just him. At this moment, the shadowy old man sneered and said, "Lulu, you seem to have forgotten that this kid has the Holy Soul Curse seal in his body." After saying that, the shadowy old man's expression changed. He looked at Nyetian with an extremely strange expression. Boom! At this moment, Nyetian suddenly felt that the Holy Soul Curse seal in his body suddenly became violent, crazily attacking his body. What's going on? His expression changed as he cried out in shock. He did not expect that the shadowy old man could also control the Holy Soul Curse seal. Kid, can your martial body withstand the Holy Soul Curse seal? The shadowy old man smiled cold and said coldly, "I will directly destroy you." As soon as he finished speaking, Nyetian felt the Holy Soul Curse seal in his body become even more violent, as if his entire body was about to explode. Nyetian, quickly do it. This emperor will help you suppress the Holy Soul Curse seal. At this moment, Liolio's voice was heard and said anxiously. On Nyetian's forehead, a white light flashed. Immediately, a wave of power appeared in his body, helping him to suppress the Holy Soul Curse seal. Kill. Then, his expression darkened. Starlight Heaven Slash appeared in his hand. The power of the stars around his body surged, and he directly attacked the shadowy old man. Whoosh! The shadowy old man's eyes trembled. He waved his hands, and countless white bones gathered, forming shield in front of him. Rumble! Bang, bang, bang. In the next moment, the sword's shadow fell and bombarded the white bone shield. Immediately, countless white bones flew and actually broke into pieces in the air. Bang! A muffled sound was heard. The shadowy old man's figure was sent flying. When Feng Qi and the others saw this, their faces stiffened. They were shocked by the scene before them. Tian steadied himself, and a cold smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He looked coldly at the old man and said, "You're just a discarnate soul. You can't possibly be my match." You. The shadowy old man steadied himself and looked at Nyetian with a gloomy face. He obviously did not expect the latter to be so powerful. Die! In the next moment, Nyetian moved again. He slashed his sword, and the sword's shadow whistled towards the shadowy old man. The shadowy old man once again used the white bone shield. However, it still failed to block Nyetian's sword, and his figure was once again sent flying. "Old man Guegu, you're dead, huh?" Liolio's voice was heard, and he laughed maniacally. "Even if I die, I will drag them down with me." The shadowy old man forcefully steadied himself. The light around him shook, and it was obvious that he could not hold on for much longer. His eyes were filled with murderous intent. Suddenly, he clasped his hands together and formed a strange hand seal. Oh no! Lulu saw this and suddenly realized something. He screamed, "Quick, kill him!" Nyetian's eyes trembled. He also felt that something was amiss. He moved in an instant, and the astral energy around him was pushed to the extreme. The astral heaven slash was slashed down, and the sword's shadow whistled as it headed towards the shadowy old man. The shadowy old man would not be able to withstand this attack. However, at this moment, the shadowy old man was not the least bit afraid. Instead, his lips curled into a strange smile. Boom! Then, the sword's shadow landed on the shadowy old man. The shadowy old man was directly smashed into pieces and turned into rays of white light. Nyetian landed on the ground. He frowned and said in shock, "He died just like that." He did not think that the shadowy old man would die so easily. Si Xiaoye and the others were also stunned. They were so shocked that they could not speak for a long time. After the shadowy old man was killed, the white skull floating in the air started to emit rays of white light that flowed in the air. Boom! After a while, the rays of white light in the air started to gather and instantly formed a white ball of light. Nyetian looked at the white ball of light and felt a terrifying power that was as vast as the sea. Is this the thing that Lulu was talking about? He said in his heart. Before coming to the 10,000 Bones Blood Cave, Lulu had said that he would find an item that could allow Nyetian to break through to the peak of the immortal state in a few days. Perhaps it was a white ball of light. Chapter 2761. Chapter 2761. Heavenly Blood Tears, Saint's Soul Blood Yuan? Nyetian suddenly heard Liolio's words and couldn't help but frown, with his eyes burning. Although he didn't know what the Saint Spirit's blood essence was, it must be something good since Lulu was so excited. Nyetian, bring the Saint Spirit's blood essence here. Liolio's voice was heard again. Okay. Nyetian's eyes flickered as he nodded. Then, his figure flickered as he reached out and grabbed the Saint Spirit's blood essence. What a powerful force! Feeling the Saint Spirit's blood essence at such a close distance, Nyetian could clearly feel the enormous power contained within it. It was unimaginable. Boom! However, at this moment, the entire cave suddenly shook as if it was about to collapse. What's going on? Nyetian frowned, and his heart sank. Is this place going to collapse? Fengqi came to Nyetian's side and asked in fear, how are we going to get out of here? Xixiaya also came and asked. Nyetian's face was gloomy. He looked around and saw that the smooth stone walls were shaking as if they were about to collapse. Oh no! At this time, Liolio's voice was heard again. Gu triggered the 1,000 Bones Blood Cave's destructive array before he died. This place is going to be destroyed. This! Nyetian's eyes narrowed, and he couldn't help but gasp. He had acted as fast as he could, but he was still one step too slow. The old man successfully triggered the Eternal Blood Cave's destructive array. Nyetian, quickly find the Saint Spirit's Bloodstone. This is your only chance. Liolio's voice was heard again. Saint Spirit's Bloodstone? Nyetian was confused. The Saint Soul Bloodstone is the array eye of the Eternal Blood Cave's Great Destruction Array. It is also the exit of the 10,000 Bones Blood Cave. Lulu didn't have much time to explain and shouted. Nyetian's eyes were extremely gloomy. He looked around, but had no idea where to start. The 10,000 Bones Blood Cave had a circumference of several thousand meters, and it was surrounded by smooth stone walls. On the surface, they all looked the same. Trying to find the Saint's Soul Bloodstone was like looking for a needle in a haystack. If it was the fat cat, she might have a chance to find it. But now, Nyetian couldn't communicate with Fat Cat at all. At the next moment, a strange scene happened. Wah! In the air, a blood-colored whirlpool appeared out of nowhere. Within the whirlpool, streams of blood continuously gushed out. Immediately, the smell of blood filled the entire 10,000 Bones Blood Cave. The pungent smell was suffocating. Not good. The blood spring has appeared. Lulu screamed and shouted. The entire 10,000 Bones Blood Cave will be filled with a blood spring soon. At that time, you will definitely die. Nyetian frowned. He could already feel the oppressive aura in the air. If the blood spring filled the entire 10,000 Bones Blood Cave, they would definitely be pressured to death. You guys be careful of the blood spring. I will look for the array eye. In the next moment, Nyetian forced himself to calm down and said. His figure moved, and he flew towards the sky. Bang! The power of the stars around him was wild, and he directly stabbed out with his sword, blasting it at a smooth stone wall. After the sword's shadow fell, it directly collapsed, not even leaving a mark. The entire 10,000 Bones Blood Cave was protected by the array. With Nyetian's current strength, it was impossible to forcefully break the stone wall. He was not trying to break through the formation with brute force. He was trying to find out where the Sacred Soul Bloodstone was. Since the Saint Soul Bloodstone was the array eye, it should be slightly weaker. If he was hit, the stone wall would definitely react. Next, Nyetian stabbed his sword again and again. After dozens of stabs, the stone wall in front of him did not move at all. At this moment, another blood spring appeared in midair. The entire 10,000 Bones Blood Cave was filled with the stench of blood. The atmosphere in the air was suffocating. Xixiaya and the others dodged the blood spring and were in a sorry state. They could not circulate their yuan meridians and were no different from ordinary people. No, if this goes on, I will not be able to find the Saint's Soul Bloodstone. Sweat beaded on Yetion's forehead, and he looked terrible. At his current speed, he would not even be able to find the Saint's soul bloodstone by the time the blood spring filled the 10,000 bones blood cave. Yetion, let me help you. At this moment, Xiaoya looked at Yetion and shouted, You? Yetion was taken aback and could not help but feel puzzled. However, he had no other choice. He could only descend and come to Xiaoya's side. Xiaoya's expression was solemn and solemn. Xiaoya, do you have a solution? Yetion frowned and asked in a deep voice. The blood spring was gushing out continuously. They did not have much time left. I can only give it a try. Xiaoya nodded, and a tear fell from one of her eyes. The strange thing was that this teardrop was actually bright red, like fresh blood. Yetion was taken aback when he saw the drop of blood on Xiaoya's palm. This is Heavenly Tao blood tear. Before Xiaoya could speak, Liuyo's voice was heard, and he exclaimed. The tear that Xiaoya had shed was the Heavenly Tao blood tear. The fourth other pupil, the mark of the Heavenly Tao, was rumored to be a tear left behind by the Heavenly Tao. Xiaoya's mark of the Heavenly Tao was suppressed, and she could not sense her surroundings. However, the Heavenly Tao blood tear that she shed still had the ability to sense her surroundings. However, she did not know how long it would take for her mark of the Heavenly Tao to recover after the Heavenly Tao blood tear fell. Perhaps it would take a few years, a few decades, or even forever. However, Xiaoya could not care less now. She could only take a risk. What she wanted was not the Sacred Soul Blood Yuan, but the Sacred Soul Bloodstone. Yetion, you only have one chance. Xiaoya's eyes darkened as she handed the Heavenly Tao blood tear to Yetion. Yetion nodded and carefully received the Heavenly Tao blood tear. One strike, only one strike. If he could not find the Sacred Soul Bloodstone after one strike, Yetion and the others would die in a blood cave of 10,000 bones. With these words, Yetion took a deep breath and leapt into the air. He raised the starry sky slash, and the Heavenly Tao blood tear floated above the blade. It slowly dispersed and slowly merged with the sword intent in the air. Phew! When the Heavenly Tao blood tear completely merged with the sword intent, Yetion let out a breath of impure air and tried to calm himself down. The next strike was extremely important. It concerned everyone's life and death. He could not afford to fail. Xiaoya and the others raised their heads to look at Yetion. They did not even dare to breathe loudly. Their nerves were stretched to the extreme. Boom! In the air, the power of the stars around Yetion surged out and circulated in the air. It was extremely mysterious. Attack! Yetion muttered as the power of the stars was pushed to the extreme. 300 billion sword shadows. Chapter 2762. Blood Spring Seal in the Eternal Blood Cave. The sky was filled with starlight and sword shadows. The scene was dazzling. When Xiaoya and the others saw this scene from below, they could not help but tremble, and their expressions became sluggish. Pung, pung, pung. In the next moment, countless sword shadows fell, directly bombarding the surrounding stone walls. They constantly shattered, turning into sword intent and dissipating. So powerful. Jicho Wu's cold eyes trembled, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart. Stabbing out multiple sword shadows with a single strike was nothing. Any swordsman who was slightly stronger would be able to do it. But at this moment, Yetion stabbed out too many sword shadows. Not to say there were 300 billion, but there were still hundreds of thousands of sword shadows. What was more terrifying was that the place where each sword shadow bombarded was accurate, covering the entire 10,000 bones blood cave. To be able to control the sword intent so precisely, it showed the terrifying strength of Yetion's swordsmanship. In midair, Yetion did not dare to be careless. His eyes constantly swept across the stone walls. The stone walls that were bombarded by the sword shadows did not have any change. The 300 billion sword shadows originally dispersed the sword intent, allowing the attack range to be wider. The real power was not great. Of course, Yetion did not want to break the stone walls, but he wanted to see what kind of effect the sword shadows fused with the heavenly blood tier would have on the stone walls. His eyes constantly swept across the stone walls for fear of missing any clues. This was a moment of life and death. If there was the slightest mistake, it would cause all of them to be buried here. Nietion, over there. At this time, Liolio's voice sounding very excited. Nietion's eyes flickered, and he saw that one of the smooth stone walls was indeed reacting. Originally, it had been dark, but now it was slowly turning red. Eventually, it turned bright red, which was very eye-catching. That is the Saint's Soul Bloodstone, the Eye of the 10,000 Bones Blood Cave. Lulu shouted in surprise and said directly, Nietion, break that place. Yeah. Nietion nodded heavily. Then, he flew towards the Holy Soul Bloodstone. The sword wool around him surged wildly, and he directly stabbed out with his sword. The sword's shadow whizzed out like a wild beast, heavily bombarding the stone wall. Bang! Crack! After a dull thud, the Sacred Soul Bloodstone did not move, but a crack appeared on the surrounding stone walls. Very good. Nietion's eyes trembled, and he was pleasantly surprised. As long as they could break the stone wall, they would be able to get out. Bang! Crack! Then he stabbed the stone wall with his sword again, and the crack instantly widened. However, at that very moment, Si Xiaoya's voice suddenly rang out from below. Nietion, watch out! Nietion's eyes narrowed as he felt a gust of cold wind behind his back. Hua! He abruptly turned around, only to see a giant hand condense from the blood spring appear, pressing straight towards him. Boom! Voila! Without any hesitation, he directly stabbed out with his sword. Wherever the sword shadow passed, it forcefully shattered the blood spring hand. But in the next moment, in the surrounding space, more blood spring hands appeared, baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. Like wild snakes, they enveloped Nietion. Damn it! Nietion furrowed his brows and slashed out with his sword. The sword's shadow roared and whistled, breaking through the blood spring hands. But at this moment, the number of blood springs in the Eternal Blood Cave increased, and very quickly, the entire space was flooded. Si Xiaoya and the others dodged left and right, and there was almost no place for them to hide. Nietion, don't worry about these things. Breaking the stone wall is more important. Liolio's voice rang out again, and he shouted loudly. The most important thing now was to leave this place. If Nietion was entangled by these blood springs, he would be in trouble. Yes. Nietion heavily nodded. Sword chi surged around him, and the shield of the astral soul was activated. He no longer cared about the blood springs. Pong! Crack, crack, crack. He drew in a deep breath and slashed out with his sword again. When the sword shadow landed, the cracks on the stone wall instantly expanded, spreading out like a spider web. Boom! 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 But at the same time, 3 blood spring hands landed, directly bombarding the shield of the astral soul. This caused Nietion's figure to sway, and he couldn't stand steadily for a moment. The power of the blood spring hands wasn't strong, but the blood spring contained a terrifying strange energy. It actually penetrated through the shield of the astral soul and seeped into Nietion's body. Amen? In an instant, Nietion felt a violent aura within his body. It suddenly rushed out, causing his blood and meridians to become violent, as though they were about to be thrown into disorder. Oh no, it's the forbidden power of the blood spring. Lulu screamed and directly shouted, Nietion, this emperor will help you suppress the forbidden power of the blood spring. Focus on breaking the stone wall. Okay. Nietion nodded in agreement. Forcefully enduring the terror of his body being torn apart, he roared in anger and slashed out with his sword again, bombarding the stone wall. Pong! 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 Sword after sword fell. The cracks on the stone wall gradually expanded, but the stone wall still didn't shatter. Damn it! Nietion furrowed his brows. He could feel that the restrictive power of the blood spring in his body had become even more violent. Even his 9 origin meridians had become restless, and the blood in his body was actually showing signs of flowing in reverse. Although Lulu was helping him suppress the forbidden power of the blood spring, he obviously didn't stop it from increasing. Streams of blood spring slammed into Niet Tion's body, but they couldn't break his astral soul shield. Instead, more and more of the forbidden power of the blood spring seeped into his body. Niet Tion felt the pressure increasing, and cold sweat dripped down his forehead. The astral energy in his body was also becoming weaker and weaker. Niet Tion, Si Xiaoye and the other two looked at Niet Tion with trembling eyes, but they could do nothing but worry. Their yuan meridians were completely suppressed, and they couldn't exert even the slightest bit of their strength. Not only that, the forbidden power of the blood spring was becoming more and more intense, to the point where they couldn't withstand it any longer. If Niet Tion couldn't break the blood spring in time, Si Xiaoye and the others would suffocate to death under the pressure of the blood spring. There's no more time. I can only fight. Niet Tion turned around and glanced at Si Xiaoye and the others. His brows furrowed, and his eyes darkened. In the next moment, waves of blood qi gushed out from his body. Niet Tion, what are you doing? Lulu screamed in fear. Are you crazy? This will take your life. At this moment, Niet Tion's body was filled with the forbidden power of the blood spring, but he still wanted to forcefully release his blood qi. This would undoubtedly make the forbidden power of the blood spring even more violent. The forbidden power of the blood spring was extremely terrifying. Once it went out of control, it would directly take Niet Tion's life. But now, at the moment of life and death, Niet Tion had no other choice but to fight with his life on the line. Starry Sky 9 limits, second limit, Earth Splitter. Niet Tion completely ignored Lulu, and his eyes were filled with killing intent. With a low roar, the blood qi around him fused with the sword shadows, and Starry Sky slashed out. Instantly, the sword light on the edge of the sword shone brightly, and a terrifying sword shadow whizzed out. This sword strike, Niet Tion went all out, using all the astral energy in his body. If this sword strike couldn't break the stone wall, then it would be disastrous. Chapter 2763. Chapter 2763. Saint Soul Blood, stone within the cave of Thousand Bones Blood. Niet Tion slashed down with his sword. The stone wall began to crumble, and a passage appeared. It's broken! Niet Tion's eyes trembled as he exclaimed in joy. Following that, the qi from the outside world rushed in, and the pressure in the void immediately disappeared. Niet Tion felt that the yuan meridians in his body could be operated. He took a deep breath, and his tensed face slightly relaxed. The cave of Thousand Bones Blood was enveloped by a sealed formation. Niet Tion breaking the cave was equivalent to breaking the formation. Leave! Niet Tion looked down at Si Xiaoye and the others and shouted. Si Xiaoye and the others felt that they could operate their yuan meridians. They moved and instantly arrived beside Niet Tion. Hua! Hua! At this time, several blood fountains rushed over. The waves of blood overflowed the sky as if they could drown everything. You guys leave first. Niet Tion frowned and moved. The sword intent around him was like a mountain as he swung his sword. Wherever the sword shadow passed, the blood fountains were immediately dispersed. Fengqi and Jiqiu were moved and directly rushed out from the passage. Niet Tion was in midair. He swung his sword again and forced the blood fountains back. He then turned around and was ready to leave. Si Xiaoye, what are you waiting for? Leave quickly. But at this time, he saw that Si Xiaoye did not leave. Instead, she was looking around as if she was looking for something. Saint Soul Bloodstone, it is what I am looking for. Si Xiaoye frowned and said in a deep voice. Because she had shed the heavenly tears of blood, her heavenly scar was useless now. This caused her perception to decrease greatly. She was no different from an ordinary cultivator. Saint Soul Bloodstone. Niet Tion was stunned, and his expression changed. He did not expect that what Si Xiaoye was looking for was the Saint Soul Bloodstone. But just now he was too flustered. Under his sword, the stone wall collapsed, and he did not pay attention to the Saint Soul Bloodstone. The Saint Soul Bloodstone was very small, about the size of an infant's fist. It was not easy to find it. Nietion, it's at the blood spring. At this moment, Liolio's voice suddenly sounded as he screamed. Nietion jerked around, and to his surprise, he saw a blood-red stone floating above a blood spring. It was none other than the Saint Soul Bloodstone. Saint Soul Bloodstone. When Si Xiaoye saw the Saint Soul Bloodstone, her eyes trembled. She wanted to rush over to take it, but her body trembled and she coughed out a mouthful of blood. Not good. The restricted power of the blood spring has seeped into her body. Lulu cried out in alarm, shouting that things were bad. Si Xiaoye's martial body couldn't be compared to Nietion's at all. Her ability to resist the blood spring's forbidden power was very weak. Si Xiaoye, go out first. Leave the Saint Soul Bloodstone to me. I'll definitely help you get it out. With a wave of his hand, a stream of energy whizzed out and sent Si Xiaoye flying out of the room. Seeing that Si Xiaoye had left the blood cave of 10,000 bones, Nietion was relieved. He immediately activated the Golden Sky armor and dashed toward the Saint Soul Bloodstone. Swoosh! However, at this moment, 2 blood springs appeared and a strong smell of blood shrouded the area. Nietion's lips twitched. He unleashed his sword aura and rushed toward the blood springs. He arrived beside the Saint Soul Bloodstone in an instant and reached out his hand to grab the stone. Boom! However, right at that moment, Nietion felt a terrifying power surging out of the Saint Soul Bloodstone and directly rushing into his body, causing him to tremble violently. What kind of force is this? He frowned and his expression changed. Nietion, leave at once, yelled Lulu. Nietion nodded and put away the Saint Soul Bloodstone without hesitation. He then entered the tunnel and arrived outside the blood cave of 10,000 bones. The moment Nietion came out from the blood cave of 10,000 bones, he breathed in the fresh air of the outside world. He immediately felt refreshed and his expression relaxed. His figure froze and floated in midair. He glanced around and realized that the blood cave of 10,000 bones was located inside a 10,000 zhang tall mountain. Kaboom! Right at that moment, the mountain in front of Nietion shook violently, and a part of it collapsed. Immediately, streams of blood gushed out and flowed down the cliff. It was as if the entire mountain was bleeding. That was close, Nietion murmured as he sucked in a breath of cold air with lingering fear in his heart. Luckily, he came out in time. If he had come out any later, he would have been buried inside the mountain. Then, his figure landed on top of the barren land. Nietion, are you all right? Si Xiaoye hurried to Nietion and asked nervously. I'm fine. With a faint smile, Nietion took out the Saint Soul Bloodstone and handed it to Si Xiaoye. This is what you asked for. Si Xiaoye was startled for a second before she accepted the Saint Soul Bloodstone and nodded. Thank you. Xiaoyu, is this what you wanted? Fengqi walked up and looked at the Saint Soul Bloodstone. He frowned and asked, What's the use of this stupid stone? To save people. Si Xiaoye nodded and carefully put the Saint Soul Bloodstone away without saying anything else. Nietion let out a faint smile. He knew that Si Xiaoye did not want to talk about it, so he did not ask further. He scanned across the crowd and was relieved after making sure that everyone was fine. To be able to come out of the 1,000 Bones cave of blood alive was a great fortune. Lulu, we just absorbed some of the forbidden energy from the blood spring. Are we all right? Nietion was a little worried and asked Lulu. It's all right. You only absorbed a little bit of the forbidden energy. It will disappear by itself. Lulu said, but in the next few days, do not overuse your Yuan meridians. Otherwise, you will trigger the forbidden energy. That would be bad. Okay. Nietion nodded and let out a deep breath. The Valley of the Holy Soul was about to close. As long as they leave the Valley of the Holy Soul, they could return to their respective places and rest. After calming down, Nietion's eyes suddenly lit up and he asked Lulu, the thing you told me can help me break through to the peak of the immortal realm in a few days. Is it the Saint Soul Blood Yuan? Yes. Lulu responded and said, the blood spirit of the Saint Soul is a good thing. As long as the restrictive force of the blood spring in your body dissipates, I will help you absorb it. It will take at least 3 to 5 days for you to break through to the God Realm peak stage. That's amazing. Nietion's eyes flickered with surprise and shock. He had just broken through to the half-step peak not long ago and thought that it would take a long time before he could reach the peak of the immortal realm. He did not expect that with the Saint's soul blood yuan, his strength could break through again. Lulu was right. The Saint's soul blood yuan was indeed a good thing. Nietion had once felt the power inside the Saint's soul blood yuan. It was vast and surging, even stronger than the origin energy. He was very curious about what kind of power the Saint's soul blood yuan was. Lulu, the old man that appeared in the Thousand Bones Cave of Blood. Who was he? At this time, Nietion's eyes flickered, and he couldn't help but ask. Chapter 2764. Ancient alien races. Ilio didn't respond to Nietion's question for a long time. Nietion narrowed his eyes and couldn't help wondering why Lulu didn't speak. Nietion, there's a big secret behind the sacred spirit blood yuan. It won't do you any good to know it now. A deep voice was heard. It wasn't Lulu. It was Ghost Emperor. Upon hearing the Ghost Emperor's words, Nietion's pupils contracted involuntarily. He didn't think that Ghost Emperor would speak at this time. Nietion, it's better if you don't know about the blood yuan of the Saint's spirit. Immediately after, Little Fat Cat's voice rang out. It was as if Ghost Emperor and Fat Cat had discovered something, but they weren't willing to tell Nietion. What's going on? Nietion was confused. There were too many questions in his mind. He frowned. Who is that old man? Why can he activate the sacred spirit curse in my body? In the cave of Thousand Bones Blood, the old man tried to activate Nietion's sacred spirit curse. If it wasn't for Lulu, Nietion would have been killed by the curse. The sacred spirit curse was left in Nietion's body by Dean Saint's spirit. So why could the old man activate it? That person is called Gui Guinian, the protector of the Ghost Valley tribe. However, the one you killed was only a soul clone of Gui Guinian. At this moment, Lulu, who had been silent for a long time, suddenly spoke. The holy soul curse in your body is actually one of the 3 great curses of the Holy Soul Ghost Valley clan. Ghost Valley tribe. Nietion frowned. He was even more confused. The Sacred Spirit Curse is one of the 3 great curses of the Ghost Valley tribe. Why does Dean Saint Spirit know how to use it? Before his voice faded away, his face changed, and he said in astonishment, could it be that the Holy Soul Dean is a member of the Holy Soul Ghost Valley clan? The Saint Spirit Dean you mentioned is most likely someone from the Saint Spirit Ghost Valley tribe, Lulu said in a deep voice. In fact, the Saint Spirit Valley is the ancestral land of the Saint Spirit Ghost Valley tribe. The more Nietion listened, the more confused he became. He asked, Saint Soul Ghost Valley clan, what kind of force is this? The Saint Soul Ghost Valley race was one of the 4 great races of the immemorial era. Lulu spoke in a low voice. He then paused for a moment before continuing. It's useless for you to know too much right now. Once your strength increases in the future, I will tell you everything. Nietion frowned, speechless. He was still too weak at the moment. Indeed, it was useless for him to know too much at this moment. It would only add to his worries. All right. Since you guys aren't willing to tell me more, I won't ask anymore. After a moment of silence, Nietion let out a sigh. He was facing enough problems at the moment. The 4 great races of the immemorial era were too far away for him. Following this, Nietion sat down with his legs crossed and entered a state of cultivation. The trip to the Saint Spirit Valley was coming to an end. All he needed to do now was wait for the Saint Spirit Valley to close. At the same time, Little Fat Cat and the Ghost Emperor didn't look relaxed at all. Who would have thought that the Holy Soul Dean is a member of the 4 great races of the immemorial era? Fat Cat was the first to speak. Master Chinchilla, we've miscalculated this time. Ghost Emperor let out a sigh and said with a wry smile, since the Sacred Soul Curse mark is from the 4 great races of the immemorial era, it won't be easy to control it. You 2 don't have to worry for now. Before the Sacred Soul Curse mark reaches the 9th stage, I can help Nietion suppress it. Lulu also spoke. However, the Sacred Soul Curse mark isn't an ordinary curse mark. I can only suppress it. Whether or not he can completely control, it will depend on Nietion. The 3 fellows, a cat, a remnant soul, and a blade of grass were discussing in secret. Nietian was completely unaware of what they were talking about. Fat Cat and the others were relying on Nietian to survive, so they obviously did not want anything to happen to Nietian. Nietian's future is destined to be bumpy. Fat Cat let out a long sigh and fell silent. Ghost Emperor and Lulu also fell silent and did not speak further. Half an hour later, Nietian and the others gradually recovered, but the blood spring restriction in their bodies had not completely dissipated. At this time, it was almost time. The Sacred Soul Valley should be closing soon. Nietian and the others began to take out all the sacred soul grass and blood nuclei and calculated. After a while, the sacred soul grass and blood nuclei were all distributed. Because Jicho had accumulated a lot of sacred soul grass and blood nuclei before he met Nietian and the others, she had more than 500 sacred soul grass and more than 30 blood nuclei. Even if Nietian obtained Feng Qi and Si Xiaoya's sacred soul grass and blood nuclei, it was not as much as Jicho Wu. Looks like the first place of this Sacred Soul Valley trial is not fated with me. Nietian's lips curled into a bitter smile as he sighed in his heart. However, he was already very satisfied. After all, the sacred soul grass and blood nuclei in his hands were enough for him to obtain more than 200 points, which was enough to exchange for a drop of sacred chi liquid. And more importantly, he obtained the sacred soul blood seal and sacred soul blood yuan. Both of them were better than the sacred chi liquid. Just as Nietian and the others finished distributing the sacred soul grass and blood nuclei, a strange cry suddenly rang out from the void far away. Nietian frowned, and his face darkened. He lifted his head and looked in the direction of the sound. High up in the sky, two silhouettes appeared. They stepped through the air, and their auras were incomparably ferocious. In an instant, they arrived and directly landed on the wilderness. Bang! Bang! The two silhouettes landed like two mountains. They heavily smashed down and stirred up a layer of soil wave. Nietian looked at these two people, and his eyes narrowed. These two people were tall and sturdy like giants. They were 5 to 6 meters tall, and their upper bodies were bare. Their muscles bulged, and they were bursting with power. These two people stood there like two mountains. Their auras were majestic and extremely shocking. It's you guys. When Jicho Wu and Si Xiaoya saw these two people, their eyes trembled and they exclaimed in surprise. These two tower-like giants were very famous in the outer yard. They were a pair of brothers. The eldest was called Zhu Shan, and the second was called Zhu He. The two of them were known as the One Mountain and River. More importantly, the Zhu Shan and Zhu He brothers were also part of the outer yard's 10 tigers. Zhu Shan was ranked 4th among the 10 tigers, and Zhu He was ranked 5th. These two people suddenly appeared, and they even looked so menacing. It was obvious that they did not come with good intentions. Nietian looked at the mountain and river brothers and couldn't help but frown. Of course, he could feel that these two brothers were martial artists with innate godly strength. Their martial bodies were definitely extremely powerful, but he did not know why these two were here. Who is Nietian? At this moment, Zhu Shan took a step forward and the ground around him shook. A majestic aura suddenly spread out in the air and rolled mightily. Nietian was startled. He then smiled and said, I am Nietian. What business do you two have with me? Chapter 2765. Powerful martial body. After confirming Nietian's identity, Zhu Shan unleashed his aura with unconcealed killing intent in his eyes. Kill me? Nietian was stunned for a moment. Then he thought of something and sneered. Looks like you guys are the same as Chun Shuibin. You guys want to avenge Tian Zhuowen? This was Nietian's first time meeting the brothers, yet they wanted to kill him without hesitation. It was obvious that they were not here for revenge, but for benefits. Chun Shuibin had mentioned that someone had offered a drop of holy chi liquid to buy Nietian's life. A drop of holy chi liquid was enough to drive many people crazy. Kid, you're not that stupid after all. Zhu Shan smiled cold. You killed someone from the Tian clan, so you will die in the Holy Soul Academy sooner or later. Why don't you die by our hands and let us earn that drop of holy chi liquid. Nie Tianling sneered. Where do you get your confidence from? Are you sure you can kill me? He was right. Zhu Shan and Zhu He were here for a drop of holy chi liquid. The fact that they were able to find him must have caused a huge commotion when the Cave of Thousand Bones collapsed. Kid, we've been looking for you ever since we entered the Holy Soul Valley. Do you think that you can escape from us with your strength? Before Zhu Shan could speak, Zhu He walked up from behind him and looked at Nie Tian coldly. We've been looking for me since the beginning. Hearing Zhu He's words, Nie Tian couldn't help but chuckle. Thank you for your hard work. As long as we can kill you and get a drop of holy chi liquid, it's all worth it. Zhu He smiled cold and arrogantly said, Kid, are you going to kill yourself? Or do you want us to do it? In his eyes, Nie Tian was a defenseless shrimp. It would be wiser for him to kill himself. Nie Tian frowned and his expression darkened. His current strength was already at the half-step peak. In the Sacred Soul Valley, he was not afraid of martial artists like Zhu Shan and Zhu He. The aura around Zhu Shan and Zhu He was very strong, but they were still lacking compared to Chen Shuibin. Even Chen Shuibin was killed by Nie Tian's sword. Would he still be afraid of the mountains and rivers? Right now, the problem was that the blood spring restriction in his body had yet to be removed. If he moved his Yuan meridians, it would worsen the harm caused by the blood spring restriction. He was still thinking of getting rid of the blood spring restriction power as soon as possible, and then fusing with the blood essence of the saint's soul to improve his strength. Kid, if you're afraid, you can deal with it yourself. Zhu He saw that Nie Tian wasn't saying anything and smiled cold. Don't worry, us brothers are also righteous people. As long as your friends don't say too much, we won't kill them. Finishing, his gaze swept past the people behind Nie Tian and abruptly saw Ji Cho Wu and Si Xiaoya. His face could not help sinking as a hint of shock flashed across his eyes. Just now, he only had his attention on Nie Tian and did not notice that Ji Cho Wu and Si Xiaoya were also here. You two are also here. Zhu Shan also noticed Ji Cho Wu and Si Xiaoya at this time. His expression darkened as he exclaimed. Ji Cho Wu was the outer court's #1. The Zhu brothers of course knew. And Si Xiaoya was also very famous in the outer court, mainly because of the Si clan behind her. Zhu Shan and Zhu He, get lost right now. Ji Cho Wu took a step forward and said with a cold gaze. Get lost. Zhu Shan was startled at first, but then he calmed down and chuckled. Ji Cho Wu, although you are the outer court's #1, us brothers are not afraid of you, right? Zhu He also took a step forward at this time and became savage. Si clan's eldest miss, Ji Cho Wu, it's best if you two don't get involved in today's matter. The person who wants to kill Nie Tian is someone you can't imagine. Since us brothers dare to kill him, we're not afraid of the matter being exposed. Nie Tian's expression darkened. He smiled coldly and said, Looks like the person who wants to kill me has an extraordinary identity. Since you two are so arrogant, it must be that person who promised to protect you too. Am I right? That's right. Zhu Shan laughed wildly and said, Since you understand this point, then don't resist anymore. Deal with it yourself. Zhu Shan and Zhu He, you two are too arrogant. Do you think I, Ji Cho Wu, am air? Ji Cho Wu roared and prepared to attack. Miss Ji. But at this time, Nie Tian waved his hand and stopped Ji Cho Wu. He faintly smiled and said, Let me deal with my own matter. These two fellows are very strong, but I, Nie Tian, am not a soft persimmon. Finishing, Nie Tian took a step forward. His eyes were cold, preparing to fight. Ji Cho Wu frowned. How could she not know that Nie Tian did not let her attack, because he was worried that the blood spring restriction power in her body would act up? Indeed, the blood spring restriction power in her body was very terrifying. If she attacked, it would definitely cause the restriction power to go berserk. If Zhu Shan and Zhu He appeared alone, Ji Cho Wu had absolute confidence that he could kill them in one move. But if the two of them joined hands, even she would be very fearful. Oh, you do have some backbone, kid. Seeing Nie Tian coming forward, Zhu He could not help but smile coldly and said, I want to see if your bones are harder or my fist is harder. Okay, then let's give it a try. Nie Tian's gaze darkened. The power of the stars in his body was secretly accumulating. In this battle, he tried not to use his Yuan Meridian and only used the power of the stars. Reckless, seeing that Nietian was not afraid, he could not help but roar. He took a step forward and punched. Boom! In the next moment, a mountain-like fist shadow appeared and shot directly towards Nietian. The surrounding space shook violently as a terrifying aura spread out in all directions. Nietian's eyebrows furrowed, but he didn't even try to dodge. Instead, he punched out as well. Bang! The two fists collided, and the sound of metal colliding resounded in the air. Nietian and he retreated at the same time. The difference was that he only retreated a few meters, while Nietian retreated tens of meters. Moreover, he was in a sorry state and could barely stand. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Nietian. Feng Qi and the rest saw that Nietian was injured and could not help but exclaim anxiously. Nietian had already sustained injuries in the Myriad Bones blood cave. If he fought an expert like Giant He now, he would be at a huge disadvantage. I'm fine. Nietian steadied himself and smiled faintly, wiping the blood from the corner of his mouth. One has to admit that Juhi's strength was too strong. With a single punch, he could split mountains and rivers. Nietian only used the power of the stars, so he was much weaker than Juhi. However, Juhi did not look happy. Instead, he looked shocked. His punch just now was enough to instantly crush a peak half-step martial artist. But Nietian was only slightly injured. This was too strange. Second brother, this kid's martial body is very strong. Do not underestimate him. Jushan frowned. Sensing how terrifying Nietian was, he reminded Juhi. Okay. Juhi nodded. Then his eyes grew cold as he stared at Nietian and said, Kid, it seems that I've underestimated you. Chapter 2766. Shameless. Tianling's voice trailed off as his eyes surged with battle intent. Juhi looked at Nietian and was startled at first. Then, he sneered, Kid, you sure are arrogant. I'm afraid you don't know this, but in the entire outer yard, if we claim to be second, no one would dare to claim to be first. You want to compete with us in terms of physique? You're seeking death. Is that so? Yeah, Tianling chuckled. Then his eyes darkened and he said coldly, What if my physique is stronger than yours? Kid, I think you're still asleep? Juhi laughed and said arrogantly, If you have the guts, let's compete in terms of physique. If you win, not only will we not kill you, we will also recognize you as our boss. If you tell us to go east, we will not go west. Really? Nietian's eyes flickered and he asked back with a cold smile. When Juhi, speak, I can make a hole in the ground with my saliva. Juhi said arrogantly. Very good. Nietian smiled faintly, a strange expression appearing on his face. Kid, you haven't heard everything I have to say. Juhi spoke again. If you lose, then kill yourself. Furthermore, your friend has to be a witness. Your death is voluntary. Nietian smiled faintly and nodded calmly. No problem. This Juhi may look stupid, but he's actually quite smart. If Nietian killed himself, then even if this news were spread, it would have nothing to do with Juhi and Juhi. Although the people behind the mountains and rivers had promised to protect them, it would be best if Nietian could end his life on his own. Nietian. Jicho Wu's eyes trembled as he saw Nietian agree. He stepped forward to stop him. She had fought against the Juhi and Juhi brothers before and knew how terrifying their physiques were. What Juhi said just now was indeed correct. In the entire Myriad sect, in terms of martial body strength, the Shana brothers were definitely second to none. Even number one person in the outer sect, Jicho Wu, could not compete with the Shana brothers in terms of martial body. Jicho Wu admitted that Nietian's talent was very strong. It could be said to be abnormal. However, Nietian was only at the peak of half a step. Furthermore, he still had the blood spring forbidden power in his body. How could he possibly defeat the mountain and river brothers in terms of martial body? Trust me. Nietian smiled faintly and calmly. Jicho Wu looked at Nietian and sensed the powerful confidence in the latter's eyes. His eyes could not help but tremble, and he was speechless. Let's begin. Yet Tian smiled faintly, took a step forward and said, "You two brothers, who will go first?" "Me." Juhi sneered and took a step forward. "Stinking brat. You've lost for sure. Make your move." Yet Tian smiled faintly and said, "Okay." Juhi growled, and the yuan meridians in his body revolved crazily. Instantly, the energy around him exploded like the ocean, vigorous and vast. In terms of martial body, one could use the yuan meridians, but one could not use martial techniques. Martial artists only used the power of their martial body and did not use other methods to increase or stimulate their strength. Die! In the next moment, the energy around Juhi's body surged to the extreme. He roared and punched out. Yet Tian stood where he was, and the yuan meridians in his body revolved crazily. Streams of dragon chi appeared, and his aura was extremely terrifying. In the next moment, he also punched out and welcomed the punch. Bang! Two shadows of fists collided, and the air rumbled as if it was about to explode. The moment the fist shadow collapsed, Juhi's body shook, and he took a few steps back before he could stabilize himself. On the other hand, Niet Tian was like an old tree rooted to the ground and did not move at all. The victor between the two was determined in an instant. Everyone at the scene was shocked by the scene before them. Their eyes couldn't help but tremble, and they were speechless for a long time. In terms of martial body, Niet Tian actually won against Juhi. That's impossible. Juhi was stunned for a few seconds before he reacted. He roared and pointed at Niet Tian. "You weren't this strong just now. How did you suddenly become stronger?" The two of them also exchanged punches, and Niet Tian was clearly at a disadvantage. But now, how did he win against Juhi? Juhi couldn't figure it out. Just now is just now. Niet Tian smiled faintly and said, "I hid my strength just now. Can't I?" "You." Juhi instantly felt his chest tighten, and he couldn't speak. A loss is a loss. Could it be that you, Brother Shanha, don't dare to admit your loss? Niet Tianling laughed and said in a provocative manner, "Bullsh asterisk T." Juhi's eyes trembled and he yelled, "My brother Shanha always keeps his word. I can afford to lose." "That's good." Niet Tian smiled faintly and his face was calm. The reason why he was able to win against Juhi in the previous punch was because he had forcefully activated the 9 dragon veins. Furthermore, in the Sacred Soul Valley, both Niet Tian and Juhi's yuan veins were suppressed. However, Juhi's cultivation was stronger, thus the suppression was stronger too. Therefore, Niet Tian actually had the upper hand. Under normal circumstances, Niet Tian might not have been able to win against Juhi. Impressive. At that instant, Ju Shan took a step forward and stared cold at Niet Tian. "You did win against Juhi, but you have yet to win against me. Therefore, the outcome of the battle has yet to be determined." After saying this, Ju Shan's figure shuddered violently as he unleashed his aura. A tremendous force surged out like a river bursting out from a dam, causing it to rumble vigorously. Niet Tian's eyes narrowed as he sensed Ju Shan's aura. Ju Shan was obviously stronger than Juhi, and his martial physique was more terrifying. Juhi was a 5th grade half-martial sacred, while Ju Shan was a 7th grade half-martial sacred. It went without saying that his martial physique was stronger. However, Niet Tian quickly collected his thoughts. He had absolute confidence that he could defeat Ju Shan. Bang! Following this, Ju Shan's figure made his move and lashed out a ferocious punch. The giant fist silhouette was like a ferocious dragon, howling forward. "Watch out, Niet Tian!" Si Xiaoye and the others inhaled deeply upon seeing this, feeling worried for Niet Tian. Niet Tian wore a calm expression as the 9 dragon veins in his body began to circulate once again. At the same time, he unleashed his star force, causing his aura to skyrocket like an avalanche. Bang! At that instant, he lashed out with his fist. The 2 fists collided in midair, resulting in a loud explosion. In the next instant, the fists were shattered, while Ju Shan's figure was knocked over 10 meters back before stabilizing himself. On the other hand, Niet Tian's figure only swayed slightly, without moving a single step. This The eyes of the crowd shuddered violently, as if they could not believe what they had just witnessed. Nietian had defeated Zhu Shan. How is this possible? The crowd fell silent for a moment, before Zhu Shan let out a furious roar. His eyes were wide open, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. Nothing is impossible. Nietian let out a deep breath and said with a smile, "You've lost." Zhu Shan's eyes flickered as flames of anger rose in his eyes. He then let out a cold smile and said, "You've won against me and Zhu He, but you have yet to win against the two of us combined." Combined? Nietian frowned as his expression stiffened. Yes. At that moment, Zhu He took a step forward and growled, "You are competing against the Shanha brothers in terms of martial physique. Of course, you have to win against the two of us combined." Zhu Shan, Zhu He, you are too shameless. On the other side, Ji Cho Wu suddenly thought of something and said, "How can Nietian win against the two of you combined?" The Zhu Shan and Zhu He brothers were known as the mountains and rivers in one breath, because their martial physiques could merge into one, increasing their strength by several times. Chapter 2767. Where am I? Zhu Shan and Zhu He may only be ranked 4th and 5th in the outer sect's 10 tigers, but if the two of them joined forces, even Ji Cho Wu would be fearful. Zhu Shan, Zhu He, you are both famous experts in the outer court. Nietian just came to the school. Isn't it bullying for the two of you to join forces? Si Xiaoya couldn't help but reprimand. Ji Cho Wu, Missy C, this is a battle between us brothers and this kid. You two are just spectators. It's best if you don't interfere. Zhu Shan sneered with a sinister expression. Big brother's right. Zhu He chuckled, then pointed at Nietian and said, "Kid, if you're scared, then admit defeat." Nietian stood on the spot with a gloomy expression and didn't speak. He was thinking about his chances of winning after the Shanha brothers joined forces. His martial body's power was not fully unleashed. Because of the blood springs restriction, his yuan meridians were not circulated to the extreme. Furthermore, the power of 900 billion stars in his body was not unleashed to the extreme. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that Nietian's understanding of the power of stars was still at the elementary level. Otherwise, the power of 900 billion stars would not be so weak. If Giant Mountain and Giant River joined hands, Nietian believed that he would have a chance of winning if they simply added their strength together. Kid, are you going to admit defeat or fight with us brothers? Hurry up and speak. At this moment, Zhu He was getting impatient and said with a sneer, I, Nietian, have never admitted defeat in my life. Nietian's eyes darkened, and he said with determination, Since you want to fight, I, Nietian, will accompany you to the end. Nietian. Ji Cho Wu and the rest exclaimed when they heard Nietian's voice. Their eyes trembled violently. Facing the Shanha brothers alone with his martial body, Nietian was crazy. Okay. When Zhu He heard Nietian agree, his eyes trembled and he laughed wildly. Kid, you've got guts. It's a pity that your brain isn't working well. Huh. Nietian, on the other hand, was very calm and cold. Cut the crap. Let's do it. All right. Giant Mountain and Giant River spoke at the same time. Two tower-like figures took a step forward, causing the ground to tremble. Then, the two of them stood shoulder to shoulder. Their chi exploded and the space around them began to shake. At this moment, Nietian suddenly sensed that the auras of the Giant Mountain and the Giant River were slowly merging together. A surging aura, like that of a mountain, was instantly emitted. His eyes narrowed, and he was quite surprised. The fusion of the Mountain and River brothers' auras was almost perfect, far surpassing the sum of their auras. These two brothers shared the same bloodline, and their auras merged together. It was obvious that 1 + 1 was greater than 2. Brat, you're definitely going to lose. Zhu He sneered as he looked at Nietian with disdain and ruthlessness. Boom. However, at this moment, the surrounding void suddenly shook as if it was about to explode. What's going on? Zhu Shan was stunned for a moment before he shouted in panic. The others were also puzzled as they did not know what was going on. It's the Holy Soul Valley. It's about to close. Si Xiaoya was the first to react, and she shouted in surprise. Boom! 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 The next moment, several terrifying space-time forces appeared in the void and instantly enveloped everyone. Before anyone could react, they suddenly realized that the surrounding space-time aura had changed and the environment had completely changed. In the blink of an eye, Niet Tian and the others had returned to the canyon at the entrance of the Holy Soul Valley. Niet Tian's figure landed and his eyes narrowed. He immediately understood that they had been sent back by the space-time forces of the Holy Soul Valley. The Holy Soul Valley was indeed a mysterious place. It closed in an instant and sent all the martial artists out. At this moment, there were still other people standing in the canyon. Niet Tian estimated that there were about 50 to 60,000 people who had returned alive. 3 days ago, there were more than 100,000 martial artists who had entered the Holy Soul Valley. It seemed that more than half of the martial artists had died in the Holy Soul Valley. After a while, everyone calmed down a lot and walked out of the canyon. Outside the canyon, Bairuozhu and the others were still waiting for the Holy Soul trial to end. Disciples, congratulations on successfully completing this trial. Now, please hand over the Holy Soul grass and blood nucleus that you have obtained, and then you may leave. After most of the people walked out of the canyon, Bairuozhu opened her mouth and said lightly, so many people had died in the Holy Soul trial, but she did not care at all. She had long been used to it. Many people stepped forward and handed over the Holy Soul grass and blood nucleus. However, at this moment, a loud roar rang out. Boy, our competition is not over yet. Don't you think of leaving? Everyone looked in the direction of the voice and saw a huge figure. It was Zhu He of the Mountain and River Brothers. Brat, don't be a coward. On the other side, Zhu Shan's figure also appeared and shouted loudly. Just now, when the Holy Soul Valley closed, everyone basically scattered. Zhu Shan and Zhu He were afraid that Niet Tian would take advantage of the chaos to leave. Therefore, once they left the canyon, they could not wait to continue competing. When everyone saw the Mountain and River Brothers, they all looked puzzled and started discussing. What's wrong with these two brothers? From what I heard, it seems like they are competing with someone. Yeah, the Mountain and River Brothers are one of the 10 tigers of the Outer Sanctum. They are quite strong. Who exactly is so daring to compete with them? No matter who that person is, he is definitely dead. Looking at the Mountain and River Brothers' attitude, they will not let him go. As the crowd discussed, they could not help but look around, trying to find out who exactly was competing with the Mountain and River Brothers. At this moment, even Bairuozhu and the other teachers were surprised. They did not know who the Mountain and River Brothers were looking for. Zhu Shan, Zhu He, I am here. Then a voice was heard and a figure walked out calmly, standing in front of the Mountain and River Brothers. Niet Tian. When Bairuozhu saw Niet Tian, her eyes trembled and she almost screamed. She did not expect that the person competing with the Mountain and River Brothers was actually Niet Tian. At the same time, Si Xiaoya and the others also appeared and stared at Niet Tian nervously. Niet Tian. The truth was, Niet Tian could have just left and ignored the Mountain and River Brothers. However, if he did that, he would really be admitting defeat. Niet Tian had never been afraid of anyone along the way, so he would definitely step forward. However, at this moment, his expression did not look good. The sudden closure of the Holy Soul Valley was not only bad news for Niet Tian, but it was also bad news. In the Holy Soul Valley, due to the presence of the restrictive formation, the difference in strength between him and the Mountain and River Brothers was not huge. However, now that he had left the Holy Soul Valley, the difference in strength between him and the Mountain and River Brothers was real. He was only at the peak half-martial sacred realm, while the Mountain and River Brothers were at the 7th and 5th sacred realm respectively. Chapter 2768. Chapter 2768. Chapter 2768 Lunatics? Idiots? Niet Tian looked at the Shanha brothers with a gloomy expression. Based on his current strength, it was impossible for him to team up with Shanha. Brat, you've got guts to stand out yourself. Zhu He sneered when he saw Niet Tian appear. His eyes were cold. Brat, you've got guts. I, Zhu Shan, am impressed. Zhu Shan sneered as well. Although he was impressed, His eyes were cold and murderous. Nietion's appearance caused an uproar at the scene. Who is this brat? Is he competing with the Shauna brothers? He's just a half-step pinnacle trash. Who does he think he is? In my opinion, this silver-haired brat is either a fool or a lunatic. He's just a half-step pinnacle. Any one of the Shauna brothers can crush him with one finger. He seems to be a new student. I think he's called Nietion or something. He defeated Tian Zhuowen in the Sacred Soul Assessment. I heard that the Starry Sky Pavilion Master was alerted and he was taken away. He's that weirdo in the Sacred Soul Assessment who triggered the white light pillar on the Sacred Soul Stone tablet. Someone recognized Nietion, and the look in his eyes changed. Many of those who had just joined the Sacred Soul Academy had seen Nietion's amazing performance in the Sacred Soul Assessment. However, they only knew that Nietion defeated Tian Zhuowen. No one knew that Nietion killed Tian Zhuowen. Tian Zhuowen's death did not spread. It should have been suppressed by Sidu Ba-yi. However, the Tian family clearly did not want to let Nietion off. Since they could not kill him openly, they would do it secretly. Nietion reckoned that someone who offered a drop of sacred qi to kill him was most likely someone from the Tian family. "Yeah, brat, looks like you're quite famous," Zhu said with a cold smile when he heard the crowd's discussion. "Humph, humph." Nietion smiled faintly and said, "After competing with the two of you, my name will be even bigger." And Zhu's eyes darkened and he sneered, "Brat, do you really think you can win against his brothers?" "Of course." Nietion smiled faintly. His eyes were very calm, and no one could tell what he was thinking. "Presumptuous," Zhu roared. His aura was released like a volcano that was about to erupt. "Stop!" But at this time, a low voice rang out, and Bai Ruju's figure landed. His gloomy gaze swept across the giant mountains and rivers, and he said coldly, "What is going on?" Zhu Shan and Zhu He were stunned for a moment before they bowed respectfully. Zhu Shan stepped forward and said, "Teacher, this is what happened." As he spoke, he told the story. Of course, he didn't mention that they wanted to kill Nietion. He just described it as a pure competition. After Bairuaju heard this, her pretty face turned slightly cold. She looked at Nietion and asked, "Nietion, is what he said true? If they forced you, you can say it." She wasn't an idiot. Of course, she could tell that there was something fishy behind this competition. There was no way Nietion would compete with the brothers for no reason, and he would even put his life on the line. It was obvious that she was siding with Nietion at this moment. As long as Nietion was unwilling, this competition could be called off. Everyone's gaze was on Nietion, waiting for his response. Everyone guessed that Nietion would find a random reason to call off this competition. "Teacher, what he said is true." At this moment, Nietion smiled and said something that no one expected. "Between me and the brothers is purely a competition of martial physique. There's nothing else." As soon as he spoke, everyone's eyes widened and their expressions turned strange. No one had expected Nietion to say such a thing. The brothers, Zhu Shan and Zhu He, stared with their eyes wide open and were stunned. They could tell that Bairuaju was siding with Nietion and thought that they would definitely lose this competition. They didn't expect that Nietion would actually give such an answer. Is this kid crazy? Immediately, everyone came to their senses and cried out in alarm. Is he a fool? This teacher is obviously helping him. Can't he see it? I've already said that this kid is either a fool or a madman. He must be tired of living to dare to go head-to-head with the brothers. I've seen a lot of idiots, but this kid is definitely the most idiotic one. The crowd discussed loudly, not bothering to hide anything. Nietion, Bairuaju was stunned for a few seconds, then suddenly turned to look at Nietion, not knowing what to say. Last time, she forcefully accepted Jun Ouching as her disciple and almost hurt Nietion, so she felt guilty and wanted to help Nietion once, but she didn't expect the latter to not appreciate it all. "Thank you for your kindness, teacher," Nietion said, "but there are some things that I still want to solve by myself." Nietion smiled faintly, his face full of confidence. Bairuaju's face stiffened and she couldn't speak anymore. At the side, Ji-Cho Wu's eyes were cold and gloomy as he said in his heart, "Nie Tian, what are you thinking? Don't tell me you still have a powerful trump card on you? Nie Tian, you're really a madman." Si Xiaoya frowned and scolded in her heart. Only Feng Qi was still calm. He only looked at Nie Tian without much expression on his face, as if he was very confident in the latter. He and Nie Tian had been together for the longest time and knew that the latter was not an impulsive person, nor was he a fool. Since Nie Tian was so confident, it meant that he must have a powerful trump card. Zhu Shan and Zhu He, there are so many people watching. Let's not waste everyone's time. Let's begin. Then, Nie Tian smiled and stepped forward. His eyes were very determined. Okay. Zhu Shan and Zhu He roared at the same time, and the qi in their bodies surged out. The surrounding crowd felt the violent aura that was about to burst out and immediately retreated. "Lulu, you must have a way to let me win this competition." The corner of Nie Tian's lips curled up, and he said, "Nie Tian, so you're betting all your treasures on me?" Liu Yu's voice rang. There was no panic, but rather there was a trace of pride. "Of course," Nie Tian laughed and said, "Lord Lulu is so smart. You won't watch me die." This time, Nie Tian did not have much confidence. However, he believed that there were 3 monsters in his body, and all of them were heaven-defying. They would not just watch him die. Moreover, he secretly felt that there was something wrong with the blood mark of the saint spirit on his forehead. It was obvious that Lulu was doing something behind the scenes. "Nie Tian, my method will cause some damage to your martial experience. However, as long as you're strong enough, I will definitely let you win this competition." Lulu smiled proudly and was extremely confident. Nie Tian nodded his head slightly, and his eyes were filled with a strange smile. Boom! At this moment, Zhu Shan and Zhu He's figures moved. Their qi surged out, and it was extremely powerful and terrifying. What a powerful qi! The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed. At this moment, Zhu Shan and Zhu He's qi merged together, and they were even stronger than a 9th stage half-saint. Chapter 2769. Chapter 2769. Chapter 2, 769 You Lost. Nie Tian felt the aura of the Mountain River brothers, and his eyes narrowed slightly. He could sense that the aura released by the joint forces of mountains and rivers was even stronger than Ji-Cho Wu. The brothers of mountains and rivers were martial artists with powerful martial constitutions in the first place. And when they joined hands, their martial constitutions were so frightening that they were comparable to low-tier demi-saints. Boom! At this time, Nie Tian made his move. His aura surged crazily. The astral energy and dragon qi fused together, like a hurricane, gushing out of his body. At this moment, he no longer had any scruples and released the power of his martial body with all his might. Everyone felt Nie Tian's aura, and their eyes narrowed. They were all surprised. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, they would not have believed that they were looking at a half-step peak martial artist. At this moment, the aura Nie Tian emanated was even stronger than a low-rank half-saint. Everyone had to admit that they were amazed by Nie Tian's strength. Unfortunately, Nie Tian's aura was much weaker than that of the Mountain and River brothers. The Mountain River brothers could simply crush Nie Tian. "Is that all you have?" The Mountain and River brothers sneered at the same time and roared, "Brat, you're dead for sure." Following that, the auras around the two skyrocketed once again, instantly reaching their peak. One breath mountains and rivers. In the next moment, the Mountain River brothers growled and attacked at the same time. Instantly, the two forces merged together in the air and shot out with a loud bang. With an endless and violent aura, they swooped down towards Nie Tian. At this moment, everyone's eyes suddenly trembled, and they were extremely shocked. Many people had heard that the Mountain River brothers' Mountain River move was very terrifying, but they didn't expect it to be so terrifying. Ji-Cho Wu's cold eyes darkened. He was incomparably shocked. She thought to herself, if she was the one facing the Mountain River brothers at this moment, she would definitely lose. Lulu, Nie Tian could feel the overwhelming aura pressing down on him. His eyes narrowed, and he exclaimed in his heart, "Boom!" At that instant, he suddenly felt a terrifying force burst out from his body, like a surging torrent, surging wildly. "Attack!" Immediately, Liolio's voice rang out, filled with surprise and excitement. Boom! Nietion's pupils shrunk as he threw out a punch. Instantly, a tremendous amount of energy gathered around him, and a shadow of a fist shot out like a dragon. So strong, everyone suddenly felt the void tremble, and they all cried out in shock, their eyes glazed over. Bang! In the next instant, a dull sound rang out, as though two mountains had collided together. A simple yet violent force reverberated through the void. This was a direct confrontation between the power of the martial body. It was tyrannical and direct, an absolute head-on confrontation. Instantly, under the gaze of countless pairs of eyes, the two shadows of the fists exploded with a loud bang. A violent force spread out and formed a shockwave visible to the naked eye in the sky. Everyone's eyes flickered as the astonishment in their hearts reached its peak. No one had expected that Nietion's martial body would strangely increase in an instant. No one knew what was going on. In the next instant, a shocking scene unfolded before everyone's eyes. Puff! Puff! Zhu Shan and Zhu He's figures shuddered violently as they spat out mouthfuls of blood. Following this, the two continued to back off for over 10 meters before they finally stabilized their bodies. However, their faces were as pale as a piece of paper, without any trace of blood. On the other hand, Nietion had blood flowing out from the corner of his mouth, and his face was equally pale. However, his figure was like a towering mountain, standing there without moving an inch. This unbelievable scene caused the entire place to fall into dead silence. Everyone's expression was blank, as they could not believe their eyes. Nietion had won. This was a result that no one could have imagined. Zhu Shan and Zhu He's martial body was definitely the strongest among the outer disciples of the Holy Soul Academy. But now, even after teaming up, they had lost to Nietion. One could imagine how astounded they were. Impossible! A moment later, Zhu He recovered from his stupor and let out a roar. His entire being was like a furious lion. Zhu Shan also opened his mouth, but his mouth was wide open. After shouting one word, he could not make another sound. At this moment, the crowd also reacted and began to discuss in shock. What's going on? Brother Shan, he has lost. Oh my God, this silver-haired kid's martial body is too terrifying. He's actually stronger than the Brother Shan. Is he a monster? Is this Nietion still human? He only has the strength of a half-step pinnacle martial artist. The crowd was extremely shocked. They looked at Nietion as if they were looking at a monster. Only Bairuozhu and a few other teachers seemed to have noticed some clues, and their eyes were extremely strange. Bairuozhu could see that at the moment when Nietion threw out his last punch, a terrifying force appeared in his body, which instantly pushed his martial body to a state that surpassed its limits. If not for that strange force, Nietion would not have been able to defeat the Brother Shan He. She really couldn't understand where that terrifying power came from. At this moment, Bairuozhu looked at Nietion with shock in her eyes, as well as a hint of fear. Nietion was too strange. It was enough to make martial artists who were much stronger than him feel fear. Zhu Shan, Zhu He, you've lost. At this moment, Nietion exhaled a mouthful of murky air, stabilized his breathing, took a step forward, and said calmly, Zhu Shan and Zhu He looked at each other with extremely embarrassed expressions, unable to say a word. Whether they were unwilling or shocked, they couldn't change the result in front of them. They had indeed lost. The crowd's expressions gradually calmed down as they looked at Nietion. Other than shock, there was unconcealable admiration in their eyes. Nietion looked at Zhu Shan and Zhu He and said with a faint smile, Brother Shan He, do you still remember our agreement before the competition? Zhu He's face darkened. He was so embarrassed that he wanted to find a hole to hide in. Before the competition, the two parties had agreed that if the Brother Shan He lost, they would recognize Nietion as their boss. On the other hand, If Nyetian lost, he would have to end his own life. Actually, in this agreement, the brother Shan he had gained a great advantage. Juhi, you don't want to deny it, do you? Nyetian laughed and said, I remember someone once said that he would make a hole in the ground when he spits. What's wrong now? Are your words like farts? Nyetian, you... Juhi's eyes darkened as he clenched his fists. Boss, please accept a bow from your little brother. At this moment, Ju Shan's figure moved. He pulled Juhi and took a step forward. He lowered one knee and was about to kneel in front of Nyetian. However, the corner of Nyetian's mouth twitched. He raised his hand slightly, and an invisible force held Ju Shan and Juhi up. He then smiled and said, You don't have to kneel. However, from today onwards, you must remember who you are and what you've said. From this moment onwards, you are my, Nyetian's underlings. If I tell you to go east, you must not go west. Do you understand? His tone was calm, but domineering. Chapter 2770. Hidden Dragon lists the change in attitude of Ju Shan and Ju. He made everyone stunned and could not react in time. Just now the two of them were so unwilling. In the blink of an eye, they became Nyetian's underlings. This change was too fast, but Nyetian was very calm and did not find it strange. He could see that the Shanhe brothers were mainly decided by big brother Ju Shan. Ju Shan admitted defeat, so Ju he had nothing to say. Ju Shan, this guy, looked to be big and tall and did not have any schemes. But it was not the case. His change in attitude must be because he saw how terrifying Nyetian was. To be able to become such a person's underling, it was definitely not a bad thing for them in the future. After a long time, the disturbance caused by the competition between Nyetian and the Shanhe brothers finally subsided. Next, everyone began to hand over the sacred soul grass and blood nucleus. Half a day later, everyone's sacred soul grass and blood nucleus were handed over. In the end, the first place of this sacred soul trial was determined, and, as expected, it fell on Jicho Wu. And Nyetian, on the other hand, got the second place, but the second place also had an additional 50 points reward, which was an unexpected surprise. All the points were recorded in everyone's school token. In Nyetian's token, there were already 252 points. He was definitely a point tycoon. After doing this, everyone began to disperse. Nyetian and the others returned to the outer court together. Ju Shan and Ju, he also followed behind them respectfully, as if they were guards. Back at the outer court, Nyetian and Feng Qi parted ways, while Ju Shan and Ju, he continued to follow behind him. Nyetian prepared to use his points to exchange for a drop of holy qi liquid, and then in the following period of time, he could recover his body. And when the martial body completely recovered, he could integrate the power of the sacred soul blood yuan and prepare to break through to the peak of the divine state. Ju Shan, I want to know, who is the person who used a drop of holy qi liquid to buy my life? On the way, Nyetian finally could not help but ask. Boss, this. Ju Shan's face changed. He was in a difficult position. What? Don't you want to say it? Nyetian laughed, but it was a very strange laugh. Boss, it's not that we don't want to tell you. It's just that you can't afford to offend that person. Ju could tell that Nyetian was angry. Whether or not I can afford to offend them is my own business. You just need to tell me who wants to kill me, Nyetian said with a faint smile. Ju Shan and Ju, he looked at each other and finally opened their mouths. However, they didn't say a specific name. Instead, they said that person is on the Hidden Dragon list. Hidden Dragon leaderboard. When Nyetian heard this name, he could not help but narrow his eyes slightly. The corners of his mouth raised into a strange smile. He had heard of it a few times before, but he was not very clear about what the Hidden Dragon list was. He only knew that those who could enter the Hidden Dragon ranking were the top monsters in the academy. Boss, the Hidden Dragon ranking is the strongest ranking of martial arts in Saint Soul Academy. Ju Shan was aware that Nyetian had just joined Saint Soul Academy and could tell that the latter was very interested in the Hidden Dragon ranking. Hence, he explained, only 10 people can enter the Hidden Dragon ranking, and those 10 people represent the strongest fighting force in Saint Soul Academy. Then what kind of people could enter the Hidden Dragon ranking? Nyetian's eyes narrowed as he asked quietly. Any student of the Academy who is below 100,000 years old can challenge the hidden dragon ranking. Jushan nodded and continued. Right now, it is said that the weakest of the 10 on the hidden dragon ranking are Demi-Saint Pinnacle, and the top 3 are all high-grade pseudo-saints. So powerful. Nietion's eyes could not help narrowing as his expression changed. The martial artists on the hidden dragon ranking were all students of Saint Soul Academy, and they were all demi-saint and pseudo-saints. How frightening. Still, it was not that unusual when one thought about it. After all, the age requirement for those on the ranking was not that high, and anyone below 100,000 years old would be fine. For divine tier martial artists, 100,000 years old could be considered young, but it was definitely not old. After all, martial artists above the pinnacle of divine tier would have a lifespan of around 500 to 600,000 years. Nietion's current age would be around 200 years old if his past life was included, or 30 years old if his past life was excluded. Such an age would definitely stun countless pairs of eyes if it was revealed to others. Nietion did not expect that the one who wanted to kill him would be someone on the hidden dragon ranking. Boss, we can't afford to provoke that fellow right now. It's best to avoid him. Juhi smiled awkwardly. Either way, you would surpass him sooner or later with your innate gifts. Nietion smiled faintly and said nothing else. Jushan and Juhi had said a lot, and with Nietion's current ability, he definitely could not be compared to the freaks on the hidden dragon ranking. That was why he could not do anything even if he knew who wanted to kill him. Next, Nietion used 200 points to exchange for a drop of holy chi liquid. Then, he went to Batsi Peak accompanied by Jushan and Juhi. After a while, Nietion arrived at the foot of Batsi Peak. He thought for a while and finally decided to bring Jushan and Juhi to the Icefire Valley. Jushan and Juhi were both martial artists with strong martial bodies. If they could cultivate in the Icefire Lake, it would definitely be beneficial to their future growth. In this way, the two of them would definitely be more loyal to Nietion. Soon, the three of them arrived at the Icefire Valley. Nietion didn't go in directly, but rather waited outside. Nietion, come in. At this moment, Situ Batsi's voice was heard. Jushan and Juhi's expressions changed when they heard the voice, as if they were very surprised. Thank you, Senior. Nietion replied, and entered the Icefire Lake with Jushan and Juhi. Situ Batsi, who was originally sitting quietly, slowly stood up and glanced at Nietion. Then he fixed his eyes on Jushan and Juhi and said with a hearty smile, "You two have grown up so much. Senior Situ, do you know them?" Nietion was stunned. He did not expect Situ Batsi to know the Jushan and Juhi brothers, and from the looks of it, their relationship was not ordinary. Jushan and Juhi were stunned at first, but then they reacted and went forward together, knelt down, and said, "Great disciples kowtow to martial ancestor." Grandmaster. Nietion went blank for a moment. So Jushan and Juhi were great disciples of Situ Batsi. Get up. Situ Batsi laughed and said, "The last time I saw you, you were just kids in your teens. In the blink of an eye, you are almost as old as your father." Jushan and Juhi stood up happily and did not know what to say. Their father was Situ Batsi's disciple, so they called themselves great disciples. "Senior Situ, I brought them here privately. I hope you don't mind." Nietion nodded slightly and said with a faint smile, "Do I look like such a petty person?" With a laugh, Situ Batsi turned to Jushan and Juhi and said, "Now that you're here, why don't you practice cultivation in the Icefire Lake with Nietion?" "Thank you, martial ancestor." Jushan and Juhi's eyes were burning with excitement. They had often heard their father talk about the Icefire Lake and had long been fascinated by it. However, they did not have the chance to meet Situ Batsi. Who would have thought that by a freak combination of factors, Nietion would actually bring them to the Icefire Lake? At this moment, the two suddenly felt a lingering fear. Fortunately, Nietion had won the martial physique competition. Chapter 2771. An uninvited guest Jushan and he looked at Nietion, afraid that he would tell Situ Bai what had happened before. How could they not see that the relationship between Nietion and Situ Bai was extraordinary? However, yet Tian didn't say anything. Instead, he entered the ice and fire lake to cultivate. Grandmaster, we'll go down too. The Shawnee brothers looked at Situ Bai excitedly and said respectfully, Go, go. Situ Bai waved his hand and said with a faint smile, You two have good talents, not inferior to your father. Let's see how long you can stay in the ice and fire lake for the first time. Thank you, Grandmaster. After the Shawnee brothers thanked him again, they directly jumped into the ice and fire lake. At this time, Tian had already entered the state of cultivation. He had decided that he would not leave the ice and fire valley before his strength increased to the peak of the god realm. He had a drop of holy chi liquid in his hand and the Saint Spirit blood origin left by Gue Gai. With the help of the Saint Spirit blood seal, he would soon break through to the peak of the god realm. But first, he had to get rid of the blood spring restriction in his body. Originally, the blood spring restriction in his body was not strong and could be completely removed in a day or two. However, in the battle with the Shawnee brothers, Tian used his primordial vein, causing the blood spring restriction to become violent. The most important thing was that in the last battle, Lulu activated the power of the Holy Soul Curse seal, which allowed Tian to defeat the Shawnee brothers. So now, while Tian was removing the blood spring restriction in his body, he had to stabilize the Holy Soul Curse seal and recover his injured martial body. While Tian was cultivating, Situ Bai was observing him. His old face became more and more strange. It had only been a few days, but Situ Bai was surprised to find that Tian's strength had broken through to the peak of the half-step peak. This kind of speed made him very shocked. However, at this moment, what surprised him the most was not Tian's strength, but Tian's martial body. Situ Bai discovered that the speed at which Tian was absorbing energy from the ice and fire lake had become extremely fast. A few days ago, Tian's absorption speed was not as fast. It seemed that Tian's martial body had undergone an astonishing change. Situ Bai was puzzled. He didn't know why there was such a change in Tian. How could he know that the reason Tian was absorbing energy so quickly was because of the Saint's Soul blood seal on his forehead? The Saint's Soul blood seal could absorb all kinds of elemental energy. It was like a fish in water in the fire and ice lake. The existence of the Saint's Soul blood seal allowed Tian to absorb energy from the outside world several times faster. In the blink of an eye, 3 days passed. Within 3 days, the Mountain River brothers came out of the lake 4 or 5 times. Tian, on the other hand, only came out once and then stayed in the lake to cultivate. At this time, Tian stood up from the lake and jumped onto the shore. Tian, have you finished cultivating? Situ Bai came to Tian's side and said with a faint smile when he felt that the latter's aura had become much stronger. No. Tian shook his head with a smile and said, Senior Situ, my cultivation this time hasn't officially started yet. Situ Bai was stunned for a moment with a stunned expression. Tian had been cultivating in the fire and ice lake for nearly 3 days. He thought that the latter was going to leave. Senior Situ, I'll take a rest first, and then I'll start preparing to break through to the peak of the god realm. Tian smiled and nodded. Break through to the peak of the god realm? Situ Bai's eyes trembled. He screamed and said, Tian, are you kidding? You just broken through to the peak of the half-step, right? He had just broken through to the peak of the half-step, and then he was going to break through to the peak of the god realm. Was Tian crazy at this time? The biggest taboo of a martial artist cultivation was that the realm was unstable. Tian's speed of improvement was not acceptable to ordinary people. Senior Situ, I know what to do. Tian knew what Situ Bai was worried about, and said with a faint smile, You? Situ Bai saw Tian's solemn face and couldn't help but frown. He didn't know what to say. How could he not know that Tian was the kind of person who was difficult to persuade? Once he decided on something, it was difficult to change it. Tian smiled faintly and took out the holy chi liquid directly. He said, I'll take this drop of holy chi liquid first to stabilize my current realm. Then I'll cultivate in the fire and ice lake and try to break through. A drop of holy chi liquid. Situ Bai was shocked when he saw the drop of holy chi liquid in Tian's palm. A drop of holy chi liquid cost 200 points. It seemed that Nie Tian had gained a lot from participating in the Sacred Soul Valley this time. Senior Situ, you can rest assured now. Nie Tian smiled faintly and took a drop of holy chi liquid directly. I can rest assured. Situ Bai nodded, his eyes full of surprise. With a drop of holy chi liquid as the foundation, Nie Tian would be much more stable when he tried to break through to the peak of the God Realm. Then Nie Tian sat cross-legged. After a few minutes, he completely absorbed the power of the holy chi liquid. When he stood up again, his aura was much stronger and his whole person looked fiercer. Senior Situ, I'm going to break through to the peak of the God Realm now. Please guard me for a few days. Nie Tian took a deep breath and said faintly, No problem. Situ Bai nodded heavily and said, I won't refuse even if you have to guard me for months or years, let alone a few days. Thank you, Senior. Nie Tian bowed and thanked him. Then he moved and entered the ice and fire lake again. Zhu Shan and Zhu He were worried that they would disturb Nie Tian, so they quickly came out of the ice and fire lake. Zhu Shan, Zhu He, let's go out now. Don't disturb him. Seeing that Nie Tian was ready, Situ Bai turned around and went out with the brothers. After the three went out, they guarded outside the ice and fire valley. Everything within hundreds of thousands of meters couldn't escape Situ Bai's perception. He wouldn't allow anyone to disturb Nie Tian's breakthrough. In the ice and fire lake, Nie Tian's aura gradually stabilized. In front of him, a white light ball appeared. It was the Saint's Soul Blood Yuan. Nie Tian, I'm going to start. At this time, Liolio's figure sounded slightly nervous. Okay. Nie Tian took a deep breath and nodded slightly. Then he closed his eyes and entered the state of cultivation. Boom! In the next moment, the Saint Soul's blood origin trembled and expanded, turning into a huge light sphere that enveloped Nie Tian. At this moment, Nie Tian felt the surging power around him slowly become active and began to flow into his body. He originally thought that the process of merging with the Saint Soul Blood Yuan would be very painful. However, to his surprise, he didn't feel any discomfort at this moment. Instead, he felt very comfortable. After a while, everything went smoothly. The power of the Saint Soul Blood Yuan continued to flow into Nie Tian's body and soon stabilized. Nie Tian, I can let you completely absorb the Saint Soul Blood Yuan in 3 days. When you open your eyes again, you will be a peak God realm martial artist. Lulu smiled proudly and then stopped talking. In the blink of an eye, 2 days passed. In the middle of the ice and fire lake, the aura around Nie Tian slowly changed. Waves of aura rolled over and over like roaring waves. At this moment, he was at the critical stage of breaking through. Outside the ice and fire valley, Situ Bai felt Nie Tian's aura and couldn't help but tremble. He said in his heart, Nie Tian is going to break through. Breaking through to the peak God realm in a few days was unheard of. Boom! However, at this time, above the Saint Soul Mountains, a huge force appeared and fell from the sky. It was vast and boundless, as if the entire sky had fallen. The terrible pressure made people's hearts tremble. Chapter 2772. Insolence Nie Fenghua. This name surfaced in Situ Bai's mind, and his old face changed in shock and embarrassment. He never thought that Nie Fenghua would suddenly appear at this time. The name Nie Fenghua was a taboo in Saint Soul Academy and was not allowed to be mentioned. Nie Fenghua was a peerless existence in Saint Soul Academy, and even in the entire Saint Soul domain. When he first entered Saint Soul Academy, he was hailed as the #1 genius of Saint Soul Academy in a million years. And after he entered the Academy, he broke all sorts of records in Saint Soul Academy. Nie Fenghua used less than 100 years to rise from an outer disciple to a core disciple. In 3 years after becoming a core disciple, he challenged martial artists on the Hidden Dragon list and won all 10 battles, easily becoming the dragon head of the list. At that time, Nie Fenghua was only 40 to 50,000 years old and was the youngest dragon head of Saint Soul Academy in its millions of years of history. At that time, Nie Fenghua's glory was limitless, and he was like the sun in the sky. Almost everyone in the academy believed that he was the next dean of Saint Soul Academy. But what happened after that was beyond anyone's imagination. For some reason, Nie Fenghua publicly broke off relations with Dean Saint Soul, and Dean Saint Soul not only severely injured Nie Fenghua and expelled him from Saint Soul Academy, but also carved his name on the Saint Soul Sin Tablet and labeled him as the biggest traitor of Saint Soul Academy. As for what happened between Nie Fenghua and Dean Saint Soul, no one knew except for the two of them. But everyone knew that Nie Fenghua was a disciple of Dean Saint Soul, and that the latter had once saved Nie Fenghua's life. So what everyone remembered was that Nie Fenghua was a scum who disobeyed his teacher, and a traitor who betrayed the academy. Who would have thought that one day, Nie Fenghua would actually return to Saint Soul Academy? Nie Fenghua, is that really you? Situ Bai's eyes trembled as he slowly raised his head and looked into the void. At this time, a black figure stood tens of thousands of meters in the sky. His figure wasn't burly, but the aura around him was like the mountains and the seas, vigorous and boundless. If one looked carefully, they could even see that the void around him seemed to be trembling slightly, as if this void could no longer bear his existence. It really is him. Situ Bai's eyes suddenly trembled. When he saw the face of the black-robed figure clearly, his heart suddenly sank, and even his body trembled. Even though he was hundreds of thousands of meters away from that figure, the enormous aura emitted from the latter's body caused his mind to tremble uncontrollably. Situ Bai was very sure that the person who appeared in the sky right now was Saint Soul Academy's greatest traitor, that most astonishing and outstanding fighter, Nie Fenghua. At the same time, in the entire Saint Soul Academy, everyone felt the pressure unceasingly being released from the sky. Their eyes trembled one after another as they looked towards the sky, endlessly shocked. Who is that? His aura is so strong. This aura is too terrifying. I feel like there's a mountain pressing down on my head. Could he be a legendary saint? What is he doing here? Could he be an enemy of our Saint Soul Academy? Everyone felt the terrifying pressure in the air, as though they were about to suffocate. It was as if the person high up in the sky could kill everyone with just a slight release of power. At this moment, facing such a fighter, everyone felt as though they were as insignificant as an ant. At this moment, the black-robed fighter high up in the sky did not make any movements, nor did he speak. He just stood there quietly, as though he was waiting for something. Boom! 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 After a moment, more than 10 figures soared into the sky from within the Saint Soul Academy. Their terrifying aura surged and instantly surrounded the black-robed fighter. It's the Saint Soul Shadow Guards. Everyone exclaimed when they saw the dozens of figures in the sky. These fighters were the Saint Soul Shadow Guards, known as the strongest defensive force of the Saint Soul Academy. It was said that the fighters who could become the Saint Soul Shadow Guards were at least pseudo-saints. May I know who you are? What brings you to the Saint Soul Academy? At this moment, one of the Saint Soul Shadow Guards spoke in a deep voice. He was not too respectful, but he did not dare to be arrogant either. Get lost. The black-robed fighter lifted his head abruptly and looked at the Saint Soul Shadow Guard. His deep voice resounded, causing the surrounding void to tremble as though it was about to explode. His voice was not loud, but contained an unconcealable, domineering aura. The sharp aura spread out, causing the surrounding Saint Soul Shadow Guards to tremble and uncontrollably take a few steps back. What was more frightening was that the slightly weaker Saint Soul Shadow Guards spat out a mouthful of blood. Their bodies swayed as though they could not stand up straight. Everyone gasped when they saw this scene. Their eyes and expressions went blank as they could not believe what they had just seen. The strength that the black-robed fighter had displayed was too terrifying. Just the pressure that he had inadvertently released was enough to make the Saint Soul Shadow Guards unable to bear it. It should be known that these Saint Soul Shadow Guards were all pseudo-saints. Any one of them would be at the top of any domain. Could this black-robed fighter really be a sage? Everyone could not help but wonder. Sidobai could not help but frown when he saw the scene in the sky. Nie Fenghua, you have only left the academy for a few decades, but your strength has already reached such a high level. He clearly remembered that when Nie Fenghua had left the Saint Soul Academy, he had only been a rank 5 pseudo-saint, and had even been seriously injured. But now, Nie Fenghua's aura had far surpassed that of a rank 9 pseudo-saint. Sidu Bai even felt that Nie Fenghua might really break through to the sage realm. However, the Saint Soul domain was not the sacred world, so it was impossible for a sage to appear. Who are you? What grudge does the Saint Soul Academy have with you? In the sky, one of the Saint Soul shadow guards steadied himself, took a step forward, and spoke again. I'll say it again, get lost. The black-robed fighter's eyes darkened, and the corners of his mouth twitched as he spoke in a deep voice. Everyone felt their hearts tremble, as though their chests had been pressed down hard. The dozens of Saint Soul shadow guards were forced to retreat like leaves in the wind, about to wither away at any time. This time, the Saint Soul shadow guards truly knew how powerful the black-robed fighter was. They retreated tens of thousands of meters away and did not dare to approach the black-robed fighter again. The people below looked at the black-robed fighter with trembling eyes, not knowing what the latter would do next. Situ Bai frowned and hesitated whether he should make a move. He was very worried that if he made a move, it might affect Nie Tian. After all, Nie Tian was at the critical stage of breaking through. Chapter 2773. Still not coming out? I, Nie Fenghua, am back. The faint voice was like a clap of thunder, resounding in everyone's ears, deafening. Everyone's eyes trembled, the fear in their hearts reaching the extreme. The next moment, the crowd seemed to explode, shouting, "Oh my God, he's Nie Fenghua. He's the biggest traitor of Saint Soul Academy, Nie Fenghua. Oh my God, no wonder this guy is so strong. He's the one who betrayed the academy. He was expelled from the academy by the dean. This time he's back. Is he going to destroy the academy? Can he destroy the entire Saint Soul Academy with his strength alone? Unless he's a saint." Everyone screamed, their faces turning green and white, completely panicking. Who would have thought that the person expelled by the dean of Saint Soul Academy would actually return? And at this time, in the Ice and Fire Lake, Nie Tian was at the critical moment of breaking through to the peak of the God Realm. The name Nie Fenghua suddenly resounded in his ears, causing his entire mind to tremble. His body also followed along. Immediately the aura in his body trembled, unexpectedly becoming chaotic. Nie Tian, what's wrong with you? Lulu suddenly felt Nie Tian's aura become chaotic, startling him, his voice shrill. This was the critical moment of Nie Tian's breakthrough, the powerful energy of the Saint's soul blood yuan flowing in his body. As long as it was slowly absorbed by his martial body, he could easily break through. But Nie Tian's meridians all over his body began to become unstable. Even the flow of his blood began to become chaotic. If Nie Tian couldn't absorb the powerful energy of the Saint's soul blood yuan at this moment, once this wild energy went out of control, it would be a fatal threat to his martial body. At that time, even if Nie Tian didn't die, his martial Dao foundation would inevitably be destroyed. At the very least, his strength would regress. At the very worst, his yuan meridians would be destroyed. Nie Tian's mind was spinning wildly, his whole body oozing cold sweat. He heard that sentence very clearly just now. Nie Fenghua, that was his father. He came to the Saint Soul domain to find Nie Fenghua. At this moment, Nie Fenghua was outside. How could he not be excited? Nie Tian couldn't wait to stand up and rush out. Nie Tian, don't be rash. No matter what, break through first. Fat Cat knew what Nie Tian was thinking. She was so scared that her face darkened, and she quickly shouted, "Pooh!" Nie Tian furrowed his brows. Suddenly, he felt a violent force rushing through his body. His body shook violently, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. "Calm down. Don't worry about anything else." Fat Cat could feel that Nie Tian's blood was about to flow in reverse, so she quickly shouted, "Sure." Nie Tian made up his mind and answered in a deep voice. At this time, if he moved recklessly, it would cause unimaginable damage to his martial body. The biggest taboo for a martial artist to break through was to be disturbed. Therefore, Nye Tian looked for Situ Bai and asked the latter to guard it for him. In the next moment, Nye Tian calmed down and began to stabilize his aura, slowly recovering. Lulu, seal Nye Tian's perception. Don't let him be disturbed by the outside world. Immediately, Fat Cat secretly said to Lulu, and Lulu agreed. Then, a white halo was released from Nye Tian's forehead, directly covering his whole body and isolating him from all contact with the outside world. Fat Cat sensed it for a while, then took a deep breath and calmed down a lot. He knew that Nye Tian was anxious to see Nye Fenghua, but at this time, he really couldn't be distracted. At the same time, outside the Ice Fire Valley, Nye Tian, Situ Bai felt that Nye Tian's aura was unstable. His eyes couldn't help but sink, and he was quite scared. He thought that Nye Tian was disturbed by the pressure high up in the sky, so his aura was chaotic. Nye Fenghua, you'd better restrain yourself. In the next moment, Situ Bai felt that the Ice Fire Valley had calmed down. He suddenly raised his head to look at Nye Fenghua and said in a heavy heart, I will not allow anyone to disturb Nye Tian, not even you. Kuyo Anaguchi, still not coming out? At this time, Nye Fenghua's voice sounded again. Like rolling thunder, he said arrogantly, if you don't come out, I'm going to make a move. Kuyo Anaguchi was the name of the dean of the Holy Soul Academy. It was obvious that Nye Fenghua's strong return to the Holy Soul Academy was for Kuyo Anaguchi. His arrogant voice fell, but the surrounding space was silent and no one appeared. The crowd looked at Nye Fenghua and couldn't help but discuss. Nye Fenghua came for the dean. I heard that he is the dean's disciple. Don't tell me he's here to kill the dean. I don't think so. After all, the dean is a teacher, and Nye Fenghua is a disciple. Will he bear the infamy of deceiving his teacher and destroying his ancestors? Look at Nye Fenghua's imposing manner. It's really powerful. I don't know if his strength has already surpassed the dean's. As the crowd talked, their eyes trembled incessantly, looking forward to the appearance of the dean of the Holy Soul Academy. Nye Fenghua, you traitor, you still have the face to return to the Holy Soul Academy. Just at this time, a powerful voice sounded in the void, rolling out and making the space tremble. Everyone's eyes trembled, and they looked towards the source of the voice. As far as their eyes could see, there were several old figures. Those figures arrived in an instant, and the imposing manner around them was like a frightening dark cloud. Even the space was pressed down a little. It's you. Nye Fenghua frowned, and a pair of Tian-Yu's cold eyes locked on the person in the lead. He coldly said a name, Tian-Yu. Among the several figures that appeared at this time, there was no Kuyo Anaguchi, but there was another big figure of the Holy Soul Academy, the Vice Dean Tian-Yu. The arrival of Tian-Yu and the others made everyone's eyes instantly blaze. Tian-Yu was the Vice Dean of the Holy Soul Academy. Although his position was slightly weaker than Kuyo Anaguchi's, he was definitely a peak expert of the Holy Soul Academy. At this moment, he appeared, not knowing how to deal with the situation in front of him. Tian-Yu was short and stout, and looked ordinary, but the frightening, imposing manner surging around him revealed that he was an 8-step pseudo-saint expert. An 8-step pseudo-saint was only 1 step away from a 9th-step pseudo-saint. Nye Fenghua, how dare you openly provoke the Holy Soul Academy? At this moment, Tian-Yu took a step forward and stared at Nye Fenghua with an icy gaze, roaring coldly. Tian-Yu, I'm here today to look for Kuyo Anaguchi. It has nothing to do with others. Nye Fenghua smiled faintly and said in a low voice, I respect you as a senior, so I advise you not to interfere. Presumptuous. Tian-Yu roared and coldly rebuked. Nye Fenghua, you're too insolent. As the Vice Dean of the Holy Soul Academy, how can I allow you to behave atrociously here? Humph. Nye Fenghua's cold eyes swept over Tian-Yu, and he suddenly laughed. What are you laughing at? Tian-Yu frowned and asked coldly. Tian-Yu, forgive me for being blunt. The corner of Nye Fenghua's mouth pulled up into a sneer, and he said indifferently, "Your strength makes me have no desire to make a move." "You." Tian Yu's old face sank, and anger rose in his eyes. He was the dignified vice dean of the Holy Soul Academy, and even in the entire Holy Soul region, he was also one of the few experts. Chapter 2774. A palm strike. Nie Fenghua's voice resounded in everyone's ears, causing their expressions to tremble. Nie Fenghua is too arrogant. He doesn't even put Deputy Dean Tian in his eyes. Deputy Dean Tian is a step away from reaching the peak of pseudo-sage. Nie Fenghua despises him like this. It's too much. Nie Fenghua's aura is indeed strong, but won't be easy for him to defeat Deputy Dean Tian. The crowd discussed, and their eyes could not help but become fiery. They were all looking forward to the battle between Nie Fenghua and Tian Yu. "Nie Fenghua, I'll give you one last chance. Leave immediately." At this time, Tian Yu spoke and roared. The aura of his whole body began to slowly release. He could feel Nie Fenghua's strength, so he would not make a move until the last moment. "Since you insist on intervening, then make a move." Nie Fenghua stood in place, but the corners of his mouth were cold, and he said directly, "You." Tian Yu's old face darkened, and a voice came from his throat. He said furiously, "You forced me to do this." At this moment, he was already forced to the point where he had no choice but to act. Boom! In the next moment, Tian Yu's body shook, and the void behind him shook. Waves of terrifying power surged out like a tsunami, instantly condensing into a greenish-black cauldron behind him. It was thousands of meters large, like a mountain floating in the sky, and its aura was incomparably violent. Ninth Heaven Cauldron! Situ Batsi saw this scene from below, and his eyes trembled slightly, revealing a trace of surprise. Of course, he knew that the Ninth Heaven Cauldron was the power of the Tian family's bloodline. Although its attack power was not strong, its defense was extremely strong. Tian Yu had the strength of a pseudo-sage in the 8th stage, but his Ninth Heaven Cauldron was enough to let him withstand the attack of a pseudo-sage in the 9th stage. When Ye Tian and Tian Zhuan fought, the latter also used the Ninth Heaven Cauldron, and its defense was indeed amazing. Tian Yu directly used the Ninth Heaven Cauldron, which was obviously very cautious. At least he could protect himself. Deputy Dean Tian's aura is so strong. I don't think this Nie Fenghua is a match for him. The crowd stared at the sky, feeling the rolling aura release from the Ninth Heaven Cauldron, and couldn't help but say excitedly, "Nie Fenghua, it's still not too late for you to leave now." Tian Yu said solemnly in the sky, "You talk too much nonsense." Nie Fenghua coldly smiled and said, "Isn't it just the profound Ninth Heaven Cauldron? I want to see if you can block a palm of mine." Arrogant. When Tian Yu heard Nie Fenghua's words, he was completely enraged. With a roar, his figure moved directly. Suddenly, the void shook, and a powerful force was released. Endless power erupted like an avalanche, pressing towards Nie Fenghua. Tian Yu was very smart. He knew that he was weaker than Nie Fenghua, so he chose to strike first. At least, he would have the initiative. Boom! In the next moment, a surging violent force descended, like a dense dark cloud, enveloping Nie Fenghua. However, Nie Fenghua had a calm expression on her face, and there was even a playful smile on her face. Immediately after, his body shook slightly, and the space around him trembled. The wild energy that surrounded him was instantly shattered. "I only need one palm to defeat you." Immediately after, Nie Fenghua smiled faintly, murmured, and then slapped out with her palm. The ordinary palm seemed to have no power, but the void suddenly sank, as if it was about to be torn apart by the huge pressure. Dang! Hum! Immediately after, the simple and unadorned palm fell and landed on the profound Ninth Heaven Cauldron. It actually let out a crisp sound of metal and stone colliding. Immediately after, the sound of a large bell rang out, resounding through the 9 heavens. Puff! In an instant, Tian Yu's figure trembled violently, and then he spat out a mouthful of blood. His entire body was directly sent flying. Deputy Dean Tian. Behind him, a figure reacted quickly, stepped out, and caught him. The crowd below, seeing this scene, suddenly felt a chill down their spine, and even their tailbones were ice cold. One palm, just one palm, and Nie Fenghua directly defeated Tianyu. Many powerful people could clearly see that there was a terrifying crack on the profound ninth heaven cauldron in the sky. In other words, Nie Fenghua's palm not only defeated Tianyu, but also seriously injured him. How is this possible? Situ Bai's eyes trembled, and he was extremely shocked. He could see that Nie Fenghua's palm just now was just a casual move, and he did not use his full strength at all. It was such a palm, but it actually caused cracks to appear on Tianyu's profound ninth heaven cauldron. It was really too terrifying. Situ Bai thought that even if he used his full strength, he might not be able to have such power. Just how high was Nie Fenghua's strength? Nie Fenghua, high up in the sky, Tianyu stabilized his body, and a pair of eyes stared at Nie Fenghua with hatred, almost spitting fire. Even in his dreams, he did not expect that the current Nie Fenghua was actually this strong. Deputy Dean Tian, I already warned you not to interfere, but you didn't listen, so don't blame me. Nie Fenghua smiled coldly and said indifferently, Actually, he had already shown mercy. Otherwise, Tianyu would already be a corpse. This time, he came to Holy Soul Academy to see Kuyo Onaguchi and to fulfill a promise he made when he left Holy Soul Academy that year. So he did not want to make things difficult for others. Tianyu's eyes were fierce, and his chest was trembling. He wished he could skin Nie Fenghua alive, but it was a pity that his strength was far inferior to Nie Fenghua's. Tianyu, I won't make things difficult for you, but I want to know, where is Kuyo Onaguchi? Nie Fenghua said heavily, suppressing his anger in his eyes. The dean is not at the academy. Tianyu's eyes trembled, and he roared coldly. Not at the academy? Nie Fenghua's face sank, and he immediately fell silent. In this situation, Kuyo Onaguchi had not come out all this time, so it was clear that he really was not at the academy. But this time, Nie Fenghua came to Holy Soul Academy, and he must accomplish that matter. Everyone looked at Nie Fenghua, not knowing what the latter was thinking. Since it's like this, then I can only do it myself. After a moment, Nie Fenghua opened his mouth, and a strange light surged in his eyes. Nie Fenghua, what do you want to do? Tianyu's old face sank, and he roared. Tianyu, what do I want to do? Can you stop me? Nie Fenghua smiled faintly, and his figure moved. After a few flashes, he came to a place in the sky above the Holy Soul mountain range. Tianyu frowned, and immediately followed. Everyone's eyes also turned, and were locked on Nie Fenghua. That place is... Situ Bai looked at Nie Fenghua from afar, and seemed to have sensed something. His eyes trembled, and he exclaimed in his heart, The Cloud Peak of Sin Valley. At this moment, he suddenly remembered that the place where Nie Fenghua was the Cloud Peak of Sin Valley. The Cloud Peak of Sin Valley was where the Holy Soul Sin Monument was. Chapter 2775. Chapter 2775. The Saint Soul Sin Tablet. Situ Bai suddenly realized that Nie Fenghua's target was the Saint Soul Sin Monument. His face instantly turned solemn. He knew that Nie Fenghua's name was carved on the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. The Saint Soul Academy had been established for a long time, but there were only 3 names on the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. One of them was Nie Fenghua. Only those who had committed heinous crimes would have their names carved on the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. Because of this, Nie Fenghua was labeled as the biggest traitor of the Saint Soul Academy. Nie Fenghua was going to the cloud peak of the Valley of Sin for the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. We can't let him destroy the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. Situ Bai's eyes darkened. He turned to Zhu Shan and Zhu He and said, You too, guard the Valley of Ice Fire. Don't let anyone near. Yes. The Zhu Shan and Zhu He brothers nodded. They saw Situ Bai so nervous, as though it was the end of the world. They had heard of Nie Fenghua's name, but they did not expect him to be so terrifying. He came to the Saint Soul Academy alone and caused the entire academy to fall into panic. Nie Fenghua, what are you trying to do? Tian Yu roared at Nie Fenghua. Don't you know what I'm trying to do? Nie Fenghua laughed coldly. He looked down at a strange peak. The peak he was looking at was the cloud peak of the Valley of Sin. At the peak of the cloud peak of the Valley of Sin stood a huge boulder that was 1,000 meters tall. It was as white as jade, smooth and round like a huge cobblestone. This white jade boulder was the Saint Soul Sin tablet of the Saint Soul Academy. Everyone in the Saint Soul Academy knew about the Saint Soul Sin tablet, but very few people knew the true use of the Saint Soul Sin tablet. Everyone thought that the Saint Soul Sin tablet was an ordinary stone tablet. Those who had committed heinous crimes would have their names carved on it. But this was only the surface use of the Saint Soul Sin tablet. Its true purpose was only known to the higher-ups of the Academy. Behind the Saint Soul Sin tablet was a shocking secret of the Saint Soul Academy. Therefore, when Situ Bai knew that Nie Fenghua's target was the Saint Soul Sin monument, his expression immediately changed. He immediately handed Nie Tian over to the mountain and Great River brothers and rushed over. You want to destroy the Saint Soul Sin tablet? Tian Yu's eyes trembled as he exclaimed. His voice became sharp. Tian Yu, maybe there's something you don't know yet. Nie Fenghua faintly smiled, saying, when I was expelled from Holy Spirit Academy that year, I made a promise. One day, I will come back and personally erase my name from the Saint Soul Sin tablet. Tian Yu's face stiffened, and he actually did not know what to say for a moment. He knew how important the Saint Soul Sin monument was, so he could not allow it to be destroyed. Once a name was engraved on the Saint Soul Sin monument, it could not be erased. Only the person who carved the name on the stone could remove it personally. But now, Kuyo Anaguchi wasn't in the academy, so if Nie Fenghua wanted to erase her name, she would have to destroy the Saint Soul Sin tablet. I originally wanted to defeat Kuyo Anaguchi and have him erase my name. Nie Fenghua coldly laughed and said, but now that he is not here, I can only personally destroy the Saint Spirit Sin tablet. You can't. Tian Yu's eyes narrowed when he heard Nie Fenghua's words, and his eyeballs almost popped out of their sockets. I've said it before, no matter what I do, you can't stop me. Nie Fenghua coldly laughed, and light shot out from her eyes, following which her silhouette moved, and the aura around her instantly sank. Like a waterfall falling from the 9 heavens, she slammed into the Saint Soul Sin monument. With the protector of the Saint Soul Sin monument here, who dares to be impudent? At this moment, a deep voice suddenly rang out from the peak of the Valley of Sin, following which 4 silhouettes appeared and soared into the sky like 4 gigantic swords. Boom, 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 boom. In the next instant, 4 muffled sounds rang out in the sky. The 4 silhouettes that soared into the sky actually forcefully resisted Nie Fenghua's aura. Nie Fenghua's silhouette halted in the sky, unable to descend any further. When Tian Yu saw this scene, his taut old face finally relaxed a little. The crowd below was dumbfounded when they saw the scene in the sky. They had no idea who the 4 silhouettes that had suddenly appeared were. Not only did they not know, even Tian Yu did not know that there were 4 protectors of the Saint Soul Sin monument hidden in the Valley of Sin. These 4 silhouettes had powerful auras that were not any weaker than Tian Yu's. All 4 of them were 8th Order Pseudo-Sacred Realm cultivators. For cultivators that were close to the peak of the Pseudo-Sacred Realm were hiding in the Valley of Sin, guarding the Saint Soul Sin monument at all times. One could imagine how important the Saint Soul Sin monument was. Nie Fenghua's gaze stiffened as he sensed the terrifying force approaching him. He then let out a cold laugh. Protectors of the Saint Soul Sin monument. Interesting. I didn't expect Kuyo Anaguchi to have such a trump card up his sleeves. Currently, facing the 4 protectors of the Saint Soul Sin monument, he did not panic in the slightest. Instead, he was extremely calm. His eyes were filled with determination, without any hint of fear, as if he would be able to remain calm even if thousands of troops were to stand in his way. Nie Fenghua, leave now, and the Sacred Soul Academy will not pursue what happened today. At that moment, Tian Yu spoke in a loud voice. Oof. Nie Fenghua let out a cold laugh and said, "Since I'm here today, how can I leave before I finish what I came here for?" Saying this, his gaze darkened as he glanced at the four protectors of the Saint Soul Sin Monument and said with a disdainful smile, "Although you four are only 8th Order pseudo-sacred realm cultivators, your auras are similar, so you must be four brothers. Even an ordinary peak pseudo-sacred realm cultivator would not be a match for you if you work together. Since you know this, you should get lost." One of the protectors let out a furious roar. His aura surged as he tried to knock Nie Fenghua away. But unfortunately, Nie Fenghua stood tall in the sky like a boundless mountain. She couldn't move at all. "I'm not done yet. Why are you in such a hurry?" Nie Fenghua smiled faintly and said, "The four of you are very strong, but it's a pity that the person you met today is the broken sword and crippled blade Nie Fenghua. I only need the broken sword to break the four of you working together." As soon as he finished speaking, Nie Fenghua raised his hand, and a sword appeared in his hand. However, it was a broken sword. Furthermore, it was black and swarthy, as if it had rusted. It did not feel sharp at all. Oh no! Tian Yu's eyes trembled when he saw the broken sword in Nie Fenghua's hand, and he could not help but exclaim in his heart. He knew that Nie Fenghua was a very strange martialist who cultivated both the sword and the blade. At that moment, the broken sword in Nie Fenghua's hand was his sword spirit, the broken sword. Nie Fenghua was known as the #1 prodigy of the Sacred Soul Academy in the past million years. His talent was not only displayed in the martial path, but also in the way of the blade and the way of the sword. It was said that when Nie Fenghua was expelled from the Sacred Soul Academy, he was a swordsman with the transcendent divine sword physique. Chapter 2776. The broken sword and the broken saber. Boom! High up in the sky, the moment Nie Fenghua revealed the broken sword, a powerful sword aura rippled outwards and extended into the surrounding space. What a powerful sword aura! Immediately, everyone felt the terrifying sword aura. Their eyes trembled and their hearts were filled with shock. Although the broken sword in Nie Fenghua's hand looked very ordinary and even made people feel that it was a joke, the sword intent surging on the blade was extremely frightening, causing people to tremble in fear. Even though the crowd hated Nie Fenghua, they could not help but reveal respect and fear in their eyes. "The four of you, watch carefully. My broken sword is rarely unsheathed." Just then, Nie Fenghua spoke. The corner of his lips curled up into a smile. Then, his silhouette flickered and the broken sword pierced downwards. Buzz! Instantly, an intense sword hum resounded through the air. Like the cry of a crane from the 9 heavens, like the sound of a bell, it impacted the surrounding space. Boom! In the next moment, the huge sword intent in the sky instantly converged, and a sword shadow appeared. It was tens of thousands of meters long, and the sword radiance suddenly bloomed, as if the sun was falling down. The terrifying sword radiance was dazzling and dazzling. How terrifying! At this moment, everyone felt the powerful and sharp sword aura. Their hearts sank, and many people vomited blood on the spot under the pressure of the sword aura. It was hard to imagine that a cultivator could explode with such terrifying power with a broken sword. Boom! 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 Immediately after, the 4 Sin Monument Guardians simultaneously felt the overwhelming pressure of the sword, causing their bodies to suddenly sink, and then they began to descend. These 4 people were indeed 4 brothers. Their blood was connected and their minds were connected. Therefore, after their auras merged, the power produced was extremely powerful. But at this moment, facing Nie Fenghua's sword, they could not withstand it no matter how hard they tried. Oh no! Tian Yu saw the scene before him, and his face was filled with shock as he screamed. How could he not see that the 4 Sin Monument Protectors were already at their limits? "None of you can stop me." High up in the sky, Nie Fenghua's voice resounded like thunder. Instantly, an even more terrifying sword aura was released. Like a surging wave, it slammed towards the four Sin Monument protectors. Pooh! 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 Puffed. At this moment, the four Sin Monument protectors finally could not withstand the sword pressure. Their bodies trembled and they vomited blood at the same time. We can't hold on to the Saint's soul, sinful monument. Ha ha! The Chinese Niefeng was in the air. His eyes were filled with determination as he burst into laughter. He used to be a student of Holy Soul Academy, but the moment he left, he became a sinner of the academy. He had betrayed his teacher, the academy, the Holy Soul sinner, and the greatest traitor. He had carried these things on his back for far too long. Now, he wanted to destroy the Saint's soul sin tablet and relieve the burden on his shoulders. Boom! In midair, the sword shadow surged forward like a dragon, swooping down towards the Holy Soul sinful monument. How terrifying was the power of this sword! Once it landed, the Saint's soul sin monument would definitely shatter. No! Tian Yu's eyes suddenly trembled as he screamed. Unfortunately, he was too weak and was completely unable to stop Nie Fenghua. At this moment, everyone was dumbfounded as they stared at the sword shadow descending from the sky. Stop! In the nick of time, a deep roar suddenly sounded. Whoosh! 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 Following this, streaks of crimson, fiery rays of light suddenly appeared in the void and charged toward the sword shadow with a whistling sound. Bang, bang, bang. In the next instant, the crimson light bombarded the sword shadow, and the huge sword shadow started to crumble. However, the remaining power of the sword shadow was still present, and it continued to press towards the Saint's soul sinful monument. Boom! However, at the instant when the sword essence was about to land, a green halo appeared and actually enveloped the Saint's soul sinful monument, blocking the sword essence. Die! At the same time, a low roar sounded in the air. Then, an extremely sharp black ray appeared and directly bombarded Nie Fenghua's body. Boom! The sudden change of events caught Nie Fenghua off guard, and he could not react in time. With a dull thud, his body was directly sent flying, drawing a bloody trail in the air. The shocking scene caused everyone's eyes to tremble as they were extremely shocked. No one had expected that such an unforeseen event would occur at such a critical moment. Right at this moment, three figures appeared high up in the sky. Standing there, they were like three towering mountains. The Holy Soul, three elders. Tian Yu's eyes trembled when he saw the faces of the three people, and he shouted in surprise. The three elders of the Holy Soul sect. The crowd below was shocked when they heard the name, and their expressions instantly became one of shock. The Holy Soul three elders were not unfamiliar to the people of the Holy Soul Academy. In the Holy Soul Academy, the Holy Soul three elders were not weaker than the Dean. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were on equal footing. However, most people had only heard of the Holy Soul three elders. There were very few people who had actually seen them. At this moment, how could the crowd not be shocked when the Holy Soul three elders appeared at the same time? The three elders stood high up in the sky. Their auras were extremely powerful and vast like the sea. Situ Bai, Grandma Tang, and Du Quang were the Holy Soul three elders. In that instant, the three of them attacked at the same time with perfect coordination. Situ Bai blocked Nie Fenghua's sword. Grandma Tang protected the Saint's soul sinful monument, and Du Quang attacked and injured Nie Fenghua. In fact, Situ Bai had arrived a long time ago. However, he did not attack because he was waiting for Grandma Tang and Du Quang. He knew that he could not stop Nie Fenghua with his strength alone. The three of them looked at each other and then at the void. There was a blood-red figure in their eyes. It was Nie Fenghua, the Holy Soul three elders. At this moment, Nie Fenghua moved. He sneered and took a step forward. He came in front of the Holy Soul three elders. There was a wound on his body, and blood was still flowing out. However, his eyes were still sharp, and there was no fear in them. Situ Bai frowned as he looked at Nie Fenghua. He felt strange. He could feel that there was a strange force in Nie Fenghua's body that was constantly eroding his martial body. The Holy Soul Three Elders are indeed worthy of their reputation. I, Nie Fenghua, have experienced it. Nie Fenghua spoke again. His eyes were deep and firm. Nie Fenghua, let's stop here. Situbai stepped forward and said, we can let you go. Moreover, I can guarantee that the Holy Soul Academy will not pursue what happened today. Humph, humph, humph. Suddenly, Nie Fenghua laughed, a very strange laugh. The Holy Soul Three Elders' faces were gloomy as they locked their eyes on Nie Fenghua. Although Nie Fenghua was injured, they could not be careless. Nie Fenghua, don't you know when to stop? Stop now, Du Kuang said coldly. I won't leave until I'm done with my business. Nie Fenghua said in a deep voice. He smiled sinisterly and stared at Du Kuang. You injured me just now, right? So what? Du Kuang's eyes darkened and he growled. I, Nie Fenghua, have principles. Those who help me, I will remember their kindness. Those who hurt me, I will remember their hatred. Nie Fenghua smiled cold and said, you injured me. I will definitely return the favor. Du Kuang's eyes darkened. He could feel the coldness in Nie Fenghua's eyes. Make your move. I want to see how strong the Holy Soul Three Elders are when they join forces. Nie Fenghua spoke again. A broken broadsword appeared in his hand. It was his broadsword spirit, the broken broadsword. Nie Fenghua cultivated both the sword and the saber. He was both a swordsman and a swordsman. Chapter 2777. Broken Blade. Situbai's eyes narrowed when he saw the broken blade in Nie Fenghua's hand, and his mouth twitched. Nie Fenghua was known as the #1 prodigy of the Saint Soul Academy in the past million years, not only because of his talent in martial arts, but also because of his unique martial arts, sword and saber. It was already very impressive for an ordinary warrior to become a swordsman or saber user. But Nie Fenghua cultivated both the sword and the saber Dao. The most frightening thing was that his achievements in both the sword and the saber Dao were astonishing. Nie Fenghua's attainments in both the sword and the saber Dao were top-notch. Nie Fenghua rarely used his sword and saber at the same time, because he could defeat most of his opponents with only his sword or saber. But now, he was finally going to use both his sword and saber against the Saint Soul Elders. The Saint Soul Elders were all rank 9 pseudo-sanctuaries, and any one of them would be a top-notch expert in the Saint Soul domain. With the 3 of them working together, Nie Fenghua had to use both his sword and saber. Nie Fenghua, do you really want to fight the 3 of us? Du Kuang's face darkened when he saw the broken blade in Nie Fenghua's hand, and his eyes trembled. I'm here today to erase my name from the Saint Soul Sin Tablet. Nie Fenghua's eyes became even more fearless with his sword and saber in hand, and the murderous intent in his eyes became more violent. He said coldly, if you don't stop me, I won't pursue the matter of you injuring me just now. How dare you? Among the Saint Soul Elders, Grandma Tang, who had been silent all this while, said in a low voice, Nie Fenghua, I admit that you're a prodigy, but you're too arrogant. You're the first person to challenge the entire Saint Soul Academy in the millions of years since the Academy was founded. We have the intention to let you go, so why bother? If you want to fight, we'll fight with you. You're also the first person to force the Saint Soul Elders to team up. Grandma Tang's aura surged as she finished speaking, and she was clearly prepared for the battle. At this moment, Situbai also spoke and said in a low voice, Nie Fenghua, I don't know what happened to I back then. Although you have been designated as a Saint Spirit Sinner, in the eyes of I, you are still a student of Saint Spirit Academy. As long as you leave today, I, Situbai, will owe you a favor. How about it? Both Madame Tang and Du Kuang were taken aback by his words. In the distance, Tian Yu also furrowed his brows. His face could not help but stiffen. No one would have thought that Situbai would actually say such a thing. Although he didn't say that Dean Saint Soul was wrong, he definitely showed his attitude. He didn't agree with Dean Saint Soul's original practice. More importantly, Situbai was still persuading Nie Fenghua to leave and even use his own personal favor. In everyone's eyes, There was no need for Situ Bai to say such a thing in this situation. Nie Fenghua was indeed strong, but he was only one person after all. Furthermore, he had just been injured by the Holy Soul Trio Elders. If the battle continued, the Holy Soul 3 Elders would have a higher chance of winning. However, Situ Bai's words seemed to be showing weakness to Nie Fenghua, which made everyone unable to understand. Of course, the others didn't know what Situ Bai was thinking at this moment. Although he didn't have much contact with Nie Fenghua, he could feel that Nie Fenghua was definitely not the kind of scum who would deceive his master. Moreover, he sensed that there was a strange force in Nie Fenghua's body that was constantly eroding his martial body. Therefore, if the battle continued, even if Nie Fenghua could win, he would definitely be injured by the strange force in his body. Situ Bai didn't want to see a peerless genius fall just like that. Apart from that, Situ Bai had another obscure reason. QL11, he faintly felt that there was an aura on Nie Fenghua's body that was very similar to that of Nie Tian. Therefore, he guessed that Nie Fenghua might be related to Nie Tian. After Situ Bai's words, Nie Fenghua was silent for a moment. Then, he suddenly laughed and said, "Senior Situ, I respect the 3 of you as the founding elders of the academy, and will let the 3 of you have one move." His calm voice directly shocked everyone. Countless eyes suddenly froze, as if they suspected that they had heard wrongly. Nie Fenghua actually wanted to let the Holy Soul 3 Elders have one move. In a battle between experts, life and death could be decided in an instant. Especially in a battle between peak experts, one move could decide life and death. Nie Fenghua was obviously at a disadvantage at this moment. Where did his confidence come from? He actually wanted to let the Holy Soul 3 Elders have one move. In the next moment, the crowd was in an uproar. Is Nie Fenghua a madman? He's already injured, and he still dares to speak so arrogantly. This traitor is too arrogant. He simply doesn't put the Holy Soul 3 Elders in his eyes. He doesn't put the Holy Soul Academy in his eyes. No wonder the dean wanted to expel him from the academy back then. Too arrogant. In my opinion, the dean should have killed this guy back then. Then today's scene wouldn't have happened. The crowd shouted and looked at Nie Fenghua with incomparable hatred. They couldn't wait to tear the latter into pieces and eat him alive. Nie Fenghua, you're too arrogant. You really don't put the Holy Soul 3 Elders in your eyes. At this moment, Du Kuang was furious. His eyes were cold and murderous, and his aura was wild. The void behind him shook. Situ Bai and Grandma Tang were still calm, but they also looked at Nie Fenghua with anger in their eyes. The Holy Soul 3 Elders were peak experts in the entire Holy Soul region. How could they not be angry when they were looked down upon like this? I didn't look down on you. I just want to let you guys have one move first, Nie Fenghua said indifferently. His eyes were deep, and his expression was like an ancient well without any fluctuations. At this moment, he really wasn't arrogant. He just felt that since he was once a student of the Holy Soul Academy, he should be polite to the 3 elders of the academy. I don't care what kind of mentality you have. At this moment, Du Kuang roared. He could no longer suppress the anger in his heart. His aura surged, and he roared, "Since you're looking for death, then don't blame us." As soon as he finished speaking, his figure moved instantly. He slammed his palm down fiercely. Suddenly, the violent wind from his palm stirred up the dark clouds in all directions. It actually formed a black hurricane in the sky, and like a huge wave, it crashed towards Nie Fenghua. Boom! Suddenly, the void suddenly sank, and the space was instantly tightened. Heaven and earth became solemn, and the surroundings became dim. The eyes of the crowd below trembled, and their hearts were incomparably shocked. Du Kuang was indeed a rank 9 pseudo-sage expert. The power of his palm was vast and extremely terrifying. "Elder Du, let me help you." At the moment when Du Kuang made his move, Grandma Tang's voice also rang out. She also slammed her palm, and instantly, a ball of green light appeared and instantly enveloped the black hurricane. It actually doubled the power of the hurricane. Situ Bai frowned. He had already raised his palm, But in the end, he didn't attack. Chapter 2778. Boom! Just as Nie Fenghua raised the broken sword and saber, space suddenly shook. Suddenly, the space within 10,000 meters became distorted under the influence of the saber intent and sword intent. How terrifying! The people below felt the terrifying saber and sword essences from hundreds of thousands of meters away. They couldn't help but tremble in fear. In the next moment, a shield formed by the saber and sword essences appeared in front of Nie Fenghua. It was indestructible like a mountain. Sure enough, he only defended and didn't attack. Boom! Then, the black hurricane fell directly on the saber and sword shield. Suddenly, the void shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Boom, boom, boom. Then, an endless force surged and spread in all directions. It was extremely terrifying. QL-11 Nie Fenghua's figure was hit by the strong impact. He took a few steps back, but then he steadied himself. After a while, the violent waves in the void dissipated. Nie Fenghua stood in the air with his long hair fluttering in the wind. At this moment, there was a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was slightly pale, but he wasn't seriously injured. Nie Fenghua, you really live up to your name as the #1 genius, Du Kuang said coldly. Although he was extremely angry, he couldn't deny that Nie Fenghua was indeed terrifying. He and Grandma Tang's combined attack only caused a minor injury to Nie Fenghua. With such strength, Nie Fenghua could be ranked in the top 5 in the entire Sacred Soul Realm. The most terrifying thing was that Nie Fenghua was still so young. According to the age of a godly state warrior, he was still a young warrior. Grandma Tang frowned and couldn't help but look at Situbai. Situbai didn't attack just now. If the three of them had combined their attacks, even Nie Fenghua would have been seriously injured. One move passed. We can fight for real now. At this time, Nie Fenghua took a step forward and said in a deep voice. Then he turned his gaze to Situ Bai and said, Senior Situ, you and I are not enemies, but we are now standing on opposite sides. I hope you can respect me and show no mercy. His voice was calm, but it was filled with extreme arrogance. Okay. Situ Bai's eyes narrowed, and the aura around him began to surge. That palm strike just now was just a warm-up. The real battle between the four of them was about to begin. Very good. Nie Fenghua laughed insolently and said in a stern voice, Today, let me, Broken Sword and Broken Saber, go crazy for once. As the maniacal laughter faded, his entire body began to surge with saber and sword intent. The aura around him soared crazily. The surrounding space seemed to be unable to withstand his aura and shook violently. At this moment, Nie Fenghua's figure was standing high up in the sky, like a saber or a sword. The aura around him was both tyrannical like a saber and sharp like a sword. This person is terrifyingly strong. Situ Bai looked at Nie Fenghua and felt the saber and sword intent coming from the void. His eyes trembled and his heart trembled. The strength that Nie Fenghua displayed at this moment was extremely terrifying. If a martial artist below the pseudo-sacred 5th stage were to come within 10,000 meters of him, they would probably be crushed to death by the aura of his saber and sword. Such a powerful aura was something that Situ Bai had rarely seen in his life. As for the crowd below, they were even more shocked. Everyone felt a suffocating pressure. Some of the weaker martial artists had already vomited blood several times. Attack! Sensing Nie Fenghua's strength, Du Kuang let out a low roar and took the lead to attack. The terrifying black aura around him became thicker and thicker. His entire body seemed to have turned into a dark cloud that rolled out. At the same time, Situ Bai and Granny Tang also attacked. Boom! Boom! Two frightening energies surged forth like giant dragons, crushing towards Nie Fenghua. Good timing. Ha ha ha! Nie Fenghua remained fearless in the face of the joint attack of the three Holy Soul Elders. Instead, he started laughing wildly. His figure shook, and the saber intent around him exploded with a bang. Suddenly, a wild shadow that seemed like a saber yet wasn't a saber, like a sword yet wasn't a sword, and it whistled out and shook the world. Boom! Then, the attacks of the Holy Soul 3 elders landed directly on the saber and sword light. The void suddenly trembled, and several spatial cracks that were hundreds of meters long appeared in the surrounding space. The strength of Nie Fenghua and the Holy Soul 3 elders was too strong. The first head-on collision actually caused the space-time to tear. In the next moment, the figures of the Holy Soul 3 elders retreated at the same time, as if they had been hit by a violent force. The three of them stabilized their bodies under the shocked gazes of the crowd, but their expressions changed abruptly. The Holy Soul 3 elders were rank 9 pseudo-sacred powerhouses, existences that stood at the peak. The three of them attacked at the same time and took the initiative to attack. Even though they had the upper hand, they were still at a disadvantage. Such an outcome was absolutely out of their expectations. The three of them had been in the Holy Soul realm for many years, but this was definitely the first time they had seen such a scene. Nie Fenghua was too strong, too much. The Holy Soul 3 elders are indeed worthy of their reputation. At this time, Nie Fenghua's voice resounded in the void. It was fearless, arrogant, and domineering. It's a pity that in my eyes, you are still too weak. After saying, too weak, Nie Fenghua's figure had already moved. Violent saber and sword intent surged around him, sharp and powerful. In the entire Holy Soul realm, Nie Fenghua was definitely the only martial artist who had cultivated both saber and sword intent to such a level. Nie Fenghua, you are too arrogant. Du Kuang sensed that Nie Fenghua's aura had become even stronger, but he wasn't afraid. Instead, he let out a low roar and was the first to charge forward. The black chi surrounding his body became tyrannical, causing the space within tens of thousands of meters to plunge into darkness. Too weak. However, Nie Fenghua sneered again and stabbed out with the broken sword and saber at the same time. A terrifying force exploded in the void, and the destructive aura seemed to be able to destroy everything. Bang! Immediately, a saber and sword light fell and instantly landed in the space where Du Kuang was. There was a muffled sound in the air, and a blood-colored figure fell straight to the ground. It was Du Kuang. In front of Nie Fenghua, Du Kuang was simply courting death by attacking alone. Old Du, Grandma Tang's eyes trembled, and she screamed. Then, her figure turned into a stream of light and caught Du Kuang. With Grandma Tang's help, Du Kuang stabilized his body. His whole body was dripping with blood, and it was almost impossible to tell that he was human. One move, just one move, and Nie Fenghua had directly taken half of Du Kuang's life. Senior Du Kuang, that move just now was my return to you. Nie Fenghua stood in the sky like a devil and said coldly. Previously, Du Kuang had injured him, and now he was determined to take revenge. Nie Fenghua, you deserve to die. Grandma Tang growled, and her eyes were filled with hatred and murderous intent. At this moment, the people below were extremely shocked. Who would have thought that when Nie Fenghua was injured, he would first give way and then heavily injure Du Kuang in one move? In fact, they did not know that Nie Fenghua had already shown mercy in that move. Otherwise, Du Kuang would already be a corpse. Chapter 2779. Situ Bai frowned, and his expression was extremely solemn, as if he was facing a heavy choice. Situ, let's do it. Du Kuang's expression was slightly better, but his eyes were filled with bloodlust as he shouted. Are the three elders going to? Tian, you seem to have thought of something as his expression changed, and his whole body began to tremble. It seems that I have underestimated the three elders. Nie Fenghua also saw the clues at this moment, but he sneered and said, Seniors, what other trump cards do you have? Just use them. I will accompany you to the end. Nie Fenghua, can you really not leave? Situ Bai suddenly raised his head, his eyes filled with extreme helplessness. Senior Situ, I, Nie Fenghua, have my own principles. Please don't have any misgivings and attack with ease. Nie Fenghua smiled indifferently and said loudly, If Nie Fenghua loses today or dies in the hands of the three elders, it is Nie Fenghua's fate. Situbai looked at Nie Fenghua with a solemn and painful expression. Situ, he asked for it. Don't blame us. Du Kuang said fiercely at this moment. Situbai's eyes suddenly trembled, and he said coldly, Nie Fenghua, since you insist on doing this, then don't blame I. Then he looked at Grandma Tang and Du Kuang and nodded heavily. Okay. Grandma Tang and Du Kuang responded at the same time. Then, they moved and came before Situbai. The people below saw the three elders gathering together as if they were going to do something. They couldn't help but tremble, not knowing what the three elders were going to do. Boom! Boom! Situbai and the two elders looked at each other and then began to release their aura crazily. The three imposing auras were vast and extremely terrifying, as if they were going to tear the sky apart. At the next moment, a strange scene occurred. The three imposing auras actually merged in the sky. Suddenly, the terrifying pressure increased crazily like thousands of wild waves surging in the void. The surrounding space instantly became distorted, as if it couldn't hold on any longer. Nie Fenghua frowned slightly and felt strange. The attributes of Situbai and the other two were clearly different. How could they fuse into one? It really is. On the other side, Tianyu's face was filled with horror. His pair of small eyes widened to the maximum as he said in shock, Saint Soul's secret skill. He had a hunch that the Holy Soul Three Elders were going to use the legendary Holy Soul secret technique. Now that he saw the three old men's auras merging into one, he concluded that the three of them were using the Saint Soul secret technique. The Saint Soul secret technique had always been a legend of the Saint Soul Academy, and no one had ever seen it before. It was rumored that the Sacred Soul secret technique was a sage-ranked martial technique. It was extremely terrifying. Because the Sacred Soul domain didn't have any true Sage Realm warriors, it was impossible for anyone to practice the Sacred Soul secret technique under normal circumstances. However, there was a legend that said that if multiple pseudo-sage pinnacle cultivators were to cultivate together, it was possible for them to master the Sacred Soul secret art. Tian, you had heard a long time ago that the Sacred Soul Three Elders had mastered the Sacred Soul secret technique. However, he did not believe it until he saw it with his own eyes. His eyes were burning with passion. He wanted to see with his own eyes how powerful the legendary saint rank martial skill was. Nie Fenghua could sense that the aura released by the Sacred Soul Three Elders was getting stronger. His expression changed slightly, and his determined eyes started to waver. The strength displayed by the Holy Soul Three Elders was simply too powerful. Even Nie Fenghua couldn't help but be shocked at this moment. It seems like I have underestimated them. Nie Fenghua narrowed his eyes and thought to himself, do I have to use that move on the three of them? Everyone looked at the Sacred Spirit Three Elders with their hearts trembling in astonishment. If they had not seen it with their own eyes, no one would believe that there was such a powerful existence in the Sacred Soul domain. Nie Fenghua, it's not too late if you stop now. The aura of the Sacred Soul Three Elders was getting stronger and more violent. Situbai's voice was heard again. He was willing to give Nie Fenghua one last chance. He believed that no one would be able to resist the Sacred Soul secret technique. Seniors, Nie Fenghua, have learned a thing or two. However, Nie Fenghua acted as if he did not hear Situbai's words. He shouted loudly and moved his hands at the same time. In the next moment, a strange scene took place. The broken sword and the broken saber in his hands had merged into one. The Sacred Soul Three Elders were stunned by the strange scene and had a strange expression on their faces. Who would have thought that Nie Fenghua's broken sword and the broken saber could merge into one? The moment the broken sword and the broken saber merged into one, Nie Fenghua's aura changed abruptly. His aura increased by a few times, and he was like a giant standing on top of a mountain. His aura shook the heavens and the earth, making everyone's heart tremble. In the next moment, Nie Fenghua's body suddenly released a terrifying saber radiance that covered the sky and the earth. It was powerful and sharp. In just an instant, the saber radiance and the sword radiance filled the entire sky, and the surrounding space was illuminated. It was dazzling and gorgeous. However, everyone knew that under this dazzling scene, there was a terrifying, killing intent. Attack! At this moment, Situbai's voice was heard. The Sacred Soul, 3 elders moved at the same time, and a violent aura around them exploded. Then, a giant blood-colored hand appeared in the sky. The terrifying aura was like the Milky Way falling. Hum! In the next moment, the giant blood-colored hand fell, and a deep roar was heard in the void. It was as if the heavens and the earth could not withstand the force and were groaning. Boom! A majestic and boundless force spread out in the void and landed on the ground. Everyone felt their hearts sink, as if someone had pressed down on their chest with a 10,000-kilogram boulder. Puff! 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 Countless people vomited blood. Their faces were pale, and they fell to the ground. In the sky, Nie Fenghua's figure moved. The saber intent and sword intent in his body merged in an instant, and a saber and sword radiance appeared. It was like a giant dragon that had been trapped in the abyss for tens of thousands of years, and it roared into the sky. QL11 boom! Hum! The giant blood-colored hand and the saber and sword radiance whistled in the sky. It was as if 2 ancient beasts were charging at each other. Countless pairs of eyes were shocked to the extreme as they looked at the scene in the sky. Rumble! In the next moment, the 2 extreme forces finally collided with each other. Suddenly, there was a loud bang in the sky. Endless crazy power raged and spread in all directions. Crack, crack, crack. The terrifying and berserk energy was extremely destructive. The surrounding space couldn't withstand it and began to crack apart. Boom, boom, boom. Then, a space-time storm appeared and stirred the void. It was terrifying and crazy, as if the end of the world had arrived.